Cardinal Virtues, War of the Submarine, Book 1. Written by R.G. Roberts. Narrated by A.J. Shuck. Part 4. Wisdom. 31. Hide and Seek. Mon Capitaine, they have somehow sealed the hatch and are hiding below the platform. Camille's annoyance was clear, as was the call. Phones worked surprisingly well on the local network. Jules' encrypted radios were less reliable, which was why he called Camille's cell instead. He sighed. "They will not stay there. Not with the American oiler gone," he replied. Sinking Earhart was not an easy decision, but Admiral Bernard made France's position clear. The Indians already sank 2 American destroyers. France would stand with their friends and continue the fight. Better to sink Earhart before the Americans could use it to evacuate their people. "We cannot afford to lose them, Camille. Find them." "Have my orders changed?" she asked. "No." Jules bit back the desire to shout. He could feel Admiral Carré's eyes burning into the back of his head. The Indians had their own team out in search of the Americans. It's almost like they don't trust us. "Their security guards are dead," Camille said. "There was an exchange of gunfire." Jules scowled. "I saw the video." He did not bother saying he knew his people shot first. It no longer mattered. Not after the shooting incident inside the station. France was committed. Letting these Americans escape would damage her reputation just when France needed to appear strong. "The oiler broadcast a mayday call on bridge to bridge," Camille said. "What?" "It cut off, but—" "We." The word was a growl. "Next time, we torpedo the enemy." Missiles were wasteful and stupid. They caused fires, which gave quick-thinking people time to call for help. A good torpedo, however, broke a ship's keel, and that was that. No one called for help until the ship was already sunk. Jules missed Barracuda. This was not the type of warfare he trained for. "We will find the Americans, mon capitaine," she said. "We have almost broken through the hatch." "I will send another team to assist." Jules crossed his arms and glared at the display of Armistice Station schematics. Central was an excellent base of operations, but being chained to an information node chafed. Especially when I do not like the information it provides. "Call if you need anything." "Yes, Capitaine." Jules hung up and turned to look at the still scowling Carré. "Is there a problem, Admiral?" "Your Marines killed civilians. That was not part of the plan." "No, it was not." Jules heaved a sigh. "I am aware. Our countries agreed to minimize casualties. Legitimate military targets are one thing, but I will not have my nation take the fall for your inability to control your personnel." "One of those killed was a Navy lieutenant." Jules rolled his eyes. "And I will deal with the fools who opened fire. Excusez-moi." He walked out of Central without looking back, trusting Ledoux to ignore Carré if he had another tantrum. Steph crouched next to where Alex worked, a dozen feet away from the ladder leading down from the storeroom above. "Sir, you might want to listen to this." Alex asked, his voice muffled by the phone tucked under his chin. He'd turned the lights off, forcing everyone to use their phone flashlights. Luckily for him, the down ladder was near a wall and a power panel. Even better, the light switch was on the other side of the compartment. "Secretary Fowler's saying he should be in charge," she groaned. Loudly. "Let him. Keep him busy." Alex tried to force a smile, but it felt wooden. His hands wanted to shake, wanted to drop Gage's purple Nalgene bottle. Somehow, he poked a hole along its bottom edge with the multi-tool he carried since college. Pocketing the multi-tool, Alex gestured at his backpack. "Grab me some charcoal, will ya?" "What the hell are you doing, boss?" She grabbed a bag of charcoal out of the open bag and handed some over as he put the bottle down. Making a fireball. Alex dropped the phone and propped it against the wall. Used to do this at the Wick for fun. Steph laughed. Okay, I guess that's not a surprise, but I still don't get it. All you need for an impressive fireball is black powder, a spark, and non-dairy coffee creamer. I made some that were 50 feet high back at Norwich. Alex's degree wasn't in chemistry, but he'd enjoyed the class, and Norwich cadets had a tradition of getting up to some really weird shit. Almost got expelled for it my senior year. You people are crazy, Fowler shouted before Steph could respond. This is all crazy. We can't go anywhere now that Earhart is gone. What use is running? It beats surrender, Hamilton growled, twisting to look at Alex. I presume your science is something useful, Commander? Common sense does say we should put as much distance between ourselves and the enemy as possible. Alex looked up from smashing up charcoal with the bottom of the Nalgene bottle. Discouraging pursuit. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Fowler asked. Alex scooped smashed charcoal into the bottom of the bottle. He wished he had a better propellant, but cruise ships didn't exactly carry around black powder. Or quick fuses, for that matter. He'd just have to make do. It means I'm making something that'll explode and scare the shit out of the Marines following us. Fowler went white. Explode? We're at the waterline and heading downwards. Hamilton's eyes narrowed. You think an explosion is smart? Nope, Alex grinned. But this is really just a big-ass fireball. It'll burn you, but won't do much else. Coffee creamer won't cut through bulkheads. Hamilton crossed her arms. Alex used his multi-tool to cut a vague circle out of one of Gage's shirts. Gage squeaked, but didn't object when Alex shoved the circle on top of the charcoal, and then poured coffee creamer in, filling the Nalgene almost to the top. He left the lid off, lowering the Nalgene to the floor carefully. Alex's heart pounded as he slid a wire from the power panel into the hole on the bottom of the bottle. This opportunity wouldn't present itself again. The ladder down to the next level was in the other room, and the light switch was on the right wall. Perfect storms didn't happen twice. Banging floated down from the room above. Metal screeched in protest. Everyone head into the next compartment, he snapped. Get down the ladder and keep heading down. Olsen, take the lead. On it, sir. Olsen bobbed her head and darted out, gun at the ready. You're gonna wait and flip the switch? Steph whispered. Alex grimaced. Yeah. Then I'll cover you. Steph, don't give me that look, boss. White teeth flashed in the dim light as she grinned. You might be good at chemistry, but I grew up in backwoods Louisiana. My daddy took me hunting in a baby carrier. I can shoot a hell of a lot better than you, and I run faster, too. No question about that, Alex swallowed, his throat dry. He qualified bi-yearly with the 9mm when on sea duty, but that was it. Hamilton paused in the doorway to look over her shoulder. Don't linger too long, Commander. I'm not doing the paperwork that comes with you getting yourself shot. Alex barked out a laugh. I'm starting to think you like me, ma'am. She glared, and then Hamilton disappeared down the hatch on Fowler's heels, with Gage and Bradshaw bringing up the rear. Alex let out a slow breath, listening. Another crash. Someone yelped, and then metal gave way with a high-pitched squeal. Alex grabbed Steph by the shoulder, guiding her to the far side of the compartment. His palm was sweaty when it hit the light switch. This better work, Steph whispered. Charcoal's a shit accelerant if you can't filter it properly, but I used enough that it's going to explode. Alex bared his teeth. Just be ready to run. Footsteps sounded on the metal ladder steps before Steph could answer. Alex pulled the door mostly shut and held his breath, peeking through the opening. 4 Marines led the way with Camille Dubois on their heels. They fanned out around the room, turning on rifle-mounted flashlights. Camille said something in French. Alex didn't understand a word of it, but he bet she was looking for the light switch. Steph nudged him. Alex watched another Marine come down the ladder, then another, with a third following like proper little ducks. Should he wait for more? There was no way to know how many Earhart's boat chased off or shot, and "Où sont-ils allés?" Camille sounded angry. A fourth Marine started down the ladder. Screw it. Pointing Steph towards the ladder leading down from their current compartment, Alex waited 3 heartbeats, and then he flicked the light switch. The blinding flash of light reached him right before he slammed the doors shut. Striker 961 reports good visual on the Indians from 20 miles away, Bellawood's air controller reported. FLIR video on LSD-3. Captain Julia Rosario sat back in her chair in Bellawood's Combat Information Center. Much to her surprise, her hands had stopped shaking somewhere during the second missile attack. Now she waited for the first American missiles to strike their enemy, an excited shiver running down her spine. Very well. Harpoon impact in 90 seconds, another watchstander said. We're in decent shape if you discount the lack of missiles, she said to her XO, Commander Mitchell Saldivar, needing to fill the silence. He stood to her left, short enough that she didn't have to look up much. They served together for the last 18 months. 18 months of training, port visits, liberty incidents, and inspections. Sometimes Julia felt she knew him better than she did her own wife. The last hour only welded them closer. Their cruiser remained afloat, albeit almost toothless. But she still had 8 harpoons, not to mention the 8 sailing at the enemy. Thank God the harpoon is fire and forget, Mitch said. Kid's definitely not going to give hers any mid-course corrections. An Enterprise looks like shit. She's down to 6 knots. Bellawood's OSS feed showed on the middle of 4 screens, displaying the carrier in all her bleeding glory. Julia thought it a testament to Newport News Naval Shipyard that Enterprise remained afloat, but her speed dropped as fires raged aft and amidships. She chewed her lip. Captain Edwards says they've got a fire in one of their reactor compartments, and he's had to take that reactor offline. Oh, goody, Mitch said. Today gets better and better, Captain. Yeah, she sighed. I think we'll have to take her in tow. He grimaced. Towing was one of every surface warfare officer's least favorite activities. It took forever to prepare for, and handicapped the ship doing the towing. Can we make Fletcher do it? She just took a hit aft, and she's too small. Julia wished she could delegate that, but Fletcher was 3,000 tons lighter than Bellawood. Enterprise might accidentally run her over, and then where would we be? Mitch snorted. Captain, don't make me laugh. It's hard to be the scary XO when I giggle like a schoolgirl. I don't think you need to scare discipline into anyone now, Mitch, she said quietly. No shit. He shook himself. Okay, I'll go grab the first lieutenant and get the towing party together. We'll have to strip one of the repair lockers to man the forecastle, though. Do it. Julia grimaced. There's not much likelihood of us needing repair parties if we get hit anyway. She'd watched John Finn and Kidd go from sleek warships to flaming messes in mere minutes. Modern missiles just didn't give you much room for survival. Mitch knew that too, and he hurried out of CIC, heading forward to gather personnel. Harpoons on final approach, Captain, the TAO reported. If anyone wants to say a prayer, now's the time. Julia grinned toward her watchstanders. Most smiled back, gathering to watch the FLIR video from Striker 961. Julia knew she should order them back to their stations, but critical watches were manned, and damn it if her people didn't deserve to get some of their own back. Captain Bridge, Kidd's abandoning ship, the officer of the deck reported. Julia swallowed, squeezing her eyes shut. At least they were going slow enough to pick up survivors. This time. Captain I. Your turn, fuckers, Senior Chief Brummelman whispered from her right. Julia's eyes popped open. 24 Harpoon 2 missiles roared in, and the Indians launched their Barak 8 anti-air missiles. The Barak 8 was roughly on par with the SM-2, but the Harpoon's slower speed meant the Indians might manage 2 defensive salvos. However, each Indian destroyer only carried 16 Barak missiles, and each of the 4 destroyers in the lead group had 4 Harpoons to contend with. The first wave of Barak 8s took out 10 Harpoons. Julia swallowed. We should have concentrated our fire. Nothing we can change about it now, ma'am, Brummelman said. Julia nodded numbly, counting numbers down in her head and watching the tactical plot instead of the video. Bella Wood's spy radar wasn't her best radar for tracking surface contacts, but Striker 961's radar fed the Indians' tracks into Link. Spy could detect the launch of each individual missile, however. The Indians' second counter-missile launch came when the Harpoons were just 15 miles out from their strike group, boring in on the American missiles. Those are hits! Brummelman almost jumped out of his chair. Fuck yes! Several sailors cheered. Julia raised her voice. Good job, people. Set up on the undamaged destroyers to do it again. Yes, ma'am. Brummelman's grin was infectious. Julia returned it before looking back at the plot. She couldn't see details, but 2 of the Indian destroyers slowed down, dropping out of formation. That could only mean one thing. We only got 2 of them, Senior, she said in an undertone. Don't get cocky. Not a chance, Captain. We'll get the others next time. It's our goddamn turn to fire on ships without fucking missiles left. Julia almost opened her mouth to tell him not to give the Indians ideas, but they both knew the 4 closer destroyers were out of BrahMos missiles. Thank God. She took a breath, and then keyed the microphone for the tactical net. Enterprise, this is Bella Wood. Stand by to be taken in tow. Over. 32. Unpleasant Truths. Jules Rochambeau snapped an order in French, and the Marines stopped cold. He strode up to the group of refugees huddled at the corner of Earl and Cook tubes, 2 armed sailors on his heels. Marines were better shots, but Jules trusted Barracuda's crew more than the Marines sent to do the dirty work. The reason he left Central was a case in point. This group's senior Marine officer was Commandant Armand Moreau. The rank of Commandant was not as impressive as it sounded, the equivalent of a British or American major. Commandant was 2 ranks below Jules' own Capitaine de Vaisseau. 2 ranks and 200% in brain power. Jules wanted to slap Moreau. Instead, he settled for pulling the younger man to the side. What were your people thinking? He hissed in French. You've critically wounded a civilian and shot a naval officer. We are trying to do this without bloodshed, you fool. Moreau cringed and then gaped. We didn't... A naval officer? Yes, you imbecile. Jules bit back a curse. Moreau wilted so fast that it burned out most of Jules' anger. He sighed. Tell your Marines there must be no further casualties. We cannot afford the political repercussions. Yes, sir, Moreau whispered. Jules turned away in a huff, and his eye caught Maria Vasquez. He knew who she was. He researched Admiral Hamilton prior to the summit, but he couldn't guess how she and Lieutenant Lin ended up with this group. Their fellows continued to run Camille in circles, but these 2 were here. Why were they separated? Vasquez wasn't shy about staring at him. Her brown eyes were dark with fury while she stood with 2 older women, her shirt and hands coated in dried blood. Jules lifted a hand and swapped to English. "Un moment, Commander." She ignored him until heads started turning. Then Vasquez's eyes widened with feigned innocence. Me? S'il vous plaît. We'll be right here, honey, one of the old women said, earning herself a wan smile as Vasquez walked over to Rochambeau. Her scowl returned when he led her away from the clump of confused Americans. What do you want? Vasquez asked. I cannot change what has happened. and I will not insult you by offering an apology," he said. "But I can promise you that those responsible for this carnage, and Lieutenant Lynn's death, will be punished to the full extent under French law." "You knew?" Her eyes narrowed. "Did your Marine know when he shot Jesse?" "No, he did not." Jules made himself meet her angry gaze. "I find that hard to believe." "I am not concerned with what you believe." Jules stepped on his own temper. He had not wanted bloodshed with the civilians, all of whom now looked at him like they expected murder. But the consequences were his to deal with. "But I will reiterate, I regret what has happened, and we will punish those responsible." "Including yourself?" she snapped. "My patience is not infinite, madame." Jules gritted his teeth. "Do not test it." Her brown eyes flashed. "Is that a threat?" "Of course not." He could not make himself smile, though Jules knew he should. "You will be well cared for. You all will. We desire to hurt no one." Jules raised his voice for the last sentence, eyes sweeping the crowd of refugees. Most looked wary, if not outright terrified, but the older woman near the front glared. Jules turned away. What did he care if they hated him? What mattered was sending an unambiguous message to the United States. Their presence was neither wanted nor welcome in this part of the world, and it was time they focused on their own hemisphere. All the better that he could commandeer a cruise ship from a company based in Miami to do it. Norwegian Cruise Lines was displeased with the purpose of this charter, but money was money. Besides, their ships were all flagged in the Bahamas. Jules always thought it foolish of the Americans to allow their companies to use flags of convenience instead of insisting they fly the American flag. But that was not his problem. "Get them to the cruise ship," he told Moreau in French, gesturing for his sailors to follow. "Without further incident." "Oui, mon capitaine." Jules scowled and headed back towards Central, only for his phone to ring. "Oui?" Coughing filled the airwaves for a moment. Then Camille's voice came through, high and sharp. "They are setting off explosives." "What?" "We are—" More coughing. "Under Platform 3. The Americans are threatening the entire platform." Jules' heart wanted to jump into his throat. "Is there flooding?" "Not yet." Camille kicked something. "But I think we were lucky. We must be above the waterline here." "Bien." He tried to call up an image of what the area under the transplant piers looked like, but Jules had never been there. He shook his head. "Find them before they destroy something vital." Would the Americans be so suicidal? Camille's Marines killed both security officers, which left Admiral Hamilton, Commander Coleman, and assorted followers without gun-toting protection. Hamilton and Coleman were submariners. Surely they'd not do something so stupid. Unless they had nothing to lose. Stopping, Jules turned to glance at Maria Vasquez's back. Two of the older women clumped close to her. The trio spoke softly. Would a hostage prove useful? The very idea was barbaric. "They know the station better than we do," Camille snarled. "If they lose us, then do not let them." Jules started walking again, his long strides eating up the ground between himself and Central. "I will have Madame Ledoux determine what route they will take." Another cough. "Fine. We will follow them once we get this damned door open." Camille swore at someone else. Jules only caught half the words. "Hurry," he said before hanging up. Jules hated this job. "Let me know if the Admiral comes back," John told Rubino. She nodded without looking optimistic, and John patted her on the shoulder. "I'll be outside." John stepped outside the flag bridge to look at the damage, and wished he hadn't. Black smoke filled the air, billowing out of the wounds on Enterprise's port side. Sailors raced around on the flight deck, dumping water and firefighting foam through the holes to reach the inferno below. They seemed to be winning, at least the fires weren't spreading, but John didn't want to know how many died already. The black smoke looked particularly bad now that sunrise arrived. Now John could see sailors from Kidd swimming and clinging to life rafts, and he swallowed, thinking about John Finn's crew miles back in their wake. Could he send someone back to get them? Not with the Indian strike group still willing to attack Enterprise. The strike group looked respectable back when Enterprise had 4 escorts. Now she was down to 2, 1 damaged. Bella Wood maneuvered in front of Enterprise, shooting over a tow line. The cruiser looked amazingly intact compared to Enterprise's lamed state. To port, an oil streak, life rafts, and sailors in the water marked Kidd's grave. Meanwhile, Fletcher came around the carrier's stern to pick up as many sailors as she could. John could see the giant black scar where the destroyer's aft sea whiz mount used to be, now a mess of bent and scorched metal. But Fletcher seemed operational despite the damage. She was more maneuverable than Enterprise, too, though that didn't take much. Lieutenant Debbie Pittner, McNally's flag aide, approached. Her dark-skinned face was hard to see in the dark. "Sir, I've got 7th Fleet on the line." "Finally," John breathed. He handed off the satellite phone to Pittner before the last Indian attack, without hope that she'd get a hold of anyone. It was after working hours on America's East Coast, and jamming kept them from contacting any of the usual chain of command out here. But 7th Fleet was based in Japan, where it was just after 7 in the morning. "Hey, COS! The Harpoons nailed 2 Indian destroyers!" Rubino stuck her head outside the flag bridge to shout. John grinned. "Good! Tell them to do it again!" "Captain Rosario's on it, sir!" The door to the flag bridge clicked shut. John turned back to Pittner. She offered him the phone. "Thanks for getting them, Debbie," he said, and then put the phone to his ear. "This is Captain Dalton, Enterprise Strike Group COS. "I'm glad you could finally pick up the phone, Captain," a gravelly voice replied. "This is Admiral Christensen." John almost dropped the phone. Vice Admiral Jonas Christensen was Commander, 7th Fleet. He swallowed. "Admiral, I'm glad we got a hold of you. We're being jammed." "That lieutenant said something about an Indian strike group firing upon you?" Christensen said. "Please tell me she's freaking out for no reason." No, sir. We mistakenly identified and sank an Indian Kilo-class submarine in the Somme about an hour ago. INS Vishal and her escorts engaged us shortly thereafter. John Finn and Kidd are sunk. Enterprise took 3 hits, and Bella Wood has us under tow. Fletcher and Bella Wood are almost out of missiles," John replied. "We just damaged 2 Indian destroyers with harpoons, but they've hung out of range and taken pot shots at us till now." A long silence came from the other end. "Son, you'd better give the phone to Admiral McNally." "I wish I could, Admiral, but I'm not sure where he went." "Say again?" "He freaked out a bit when Kidd went down, sir," John grimaced. He didn't like diming his boss out, but he wouldn't lie. "He should be back soon." "Fine, give me your deputy commander," Christensen growled. "Sir, he's home on baby leave." "Are you telling me you're the senior person at this disaster?" John gulped. "Technically, no. Captain Edwards and Captain Rosario are both senior to me." "Who the hell is Rosario?" Christensen asked. "CO Bella Wood," John replied. "She's sharp, sir. Without her, we'd all be dead." "Tell me everything." "Let's take the fucking elevator," Bradshaw panted, skidding to a stop. 6 flights of stairs would leave anyone winded, especially someone who'd been shot. Alex was surprised Bradshaw remained on his feet. Olsen got there first, jamming her thumb into the down button 3 times. The bank had 8 elevators, 4 on each side, which ran from the top of the platform to the bottom. "You sure this is a good idea?" Hamilton looked angry, but she'd kept up, which wasn't bad for an admiral. She was somewhere way north of 40, closer to 50, and admirals weren't known for staying in shape. Predictably, her glare found Alex. Better than trucking all the way down the platform leg. Alex sucked in a deep breath, his heart still racing. "It gets narrower from here." Narrower? Fowler's head whipped left and right like a pair of windshield wipers. "There's only one room on this level, and there's only a leg after this," Bradshaw hissed as Steph examined the makeshift bandage on his arm. "Just the stairs and the elevators." Hamilton glanced back warily. "What if they stop it somehow?" "Ma'am, we can do that or tromp down another 23 stories. Alex's smile felt like a rictus. "They've probably figured out that my friendly little explosion didn't do a lot of damage. We might have enough time." 23 more stories? Gage looked ready to swoon. Alex shot him a grin as the elevator doors opened. "You can swim if you want." "Shut it, Commander," Hamilton snarled. "Let's move out." They piled into the elevator, with Fowler and Gage bolting inside and everyone else following. Olsen brought up the rear, her eyes scanning for threats. Nothing. Worry gnawed at Alex's innards. No fucking way was it going to be this easy. "You think we lost him, boss?" Steph asked. Alex shook his head. "Not unless our luck changes. You still got your tablet?" "Yeah? Why?" "Any chance of you hacking in and fucking up the elevators?" Alex jerked his head at the elevator doors. "Would give us a hell of a head start if they have to use the stairs." "Head start to where?" Hamilton asked. "In case you missed it, our ride is in flaming pieces." Those harsh words made even the Admiral flinch, but Hamilton still met Alex's eyes. "Can you, Steph?" Alex's mind whirled through options. Hamilton's glare deepened. "Probably," Steph frowned. "The entire elevator bank's got just one control panel, so it's worth a shot." "I didn't realize surface officers were hackers, Miss Gomez." Hamilton's eyes narrowed. Steph shrugged, but her eyes gleamed as she pulled her tablet out of her backpack. "It's a hobby, ma'am. Not one I'm given to practicing on government computers, though. I like my security clearance." Hamilton chuckled before turning back to Alex with those same angry eyes. "My question remains, Commander. I've got a few ideas. No good ones, though." He chewed his lip, then was saved from answering by the elevator doors dinging open. "Wait a sec," Olsen said, ducking out of the elevator. Tense seconds passed as she looked around. "Clear." Alex led the others out, glancing around. A right or left would take them up or down Cook Tube, but Earl and Central was to the left. A lump filled his throat. Jesse was murdered down there. His heart wanted to thunder straight out of his throat. But his hands moved on their own, yanking Gage's second Nalgene bottle out of his backpack. Who bought an orange Nalgene bottle? Coffee creamer, t-shirt, charcoal. Smashed the charcoal up, and all he needed was a fuse. It was funny how easy it was to jury-rig something he'd agonized over in college, building bigger and better fireballs until he and his roommate were almost expelled. If only Paul could see me now. Then again, having a recon marine around would be pretty fucking awesome right now. Grinning, Alex pounded the charcoal into dust as Steph darted over to the access panel on the far wall. "Give me a few minutes to wreck these elevators," she said. "Are you sure we have time for that?" Fowler's eyes started the windshield wiper thing. He and Gage stood close together, fidgeting like erratic dancers. "I think I hear voices." That group of Marines and civilians is still near Earl and Cook, Steph said, glancing at the camera feed on her tablet. They're close. Alex pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to stave off a growing headache. Just when we ditch one group, huh? I think we need to... Voilà! A voice shouted in French before swapping to English. Come out immediately! Shit. He twisted to look at Steph. Can you finish that thing? She didn't reply. Alex resisted the urge to kick her. Steph! I need 30 seconds. Olsen peeked around the corner. Frenchies, about 100 yards away. The assholes upstairs must have called him. Stay back! The same French-accented voice seemed pointed away from them. Then it boomed in their direction. Whoever you are, come out! Coffee creamer seeped through his fingers as Alex scooped it into the bottle. Olsen, take point. Go to the outer tube station at Few. Let's go! Olsen grabbed Gage. Bradshaw shoved Fowler. Hamilton paused to glare at Alex, whose eyes were on Steph. Hamilton crossed her arms. Time to go, Commander. Almost got it. Steph typed furiously on the tablet. Go ahead, ma'am. We'll be right behind you. Alex tucked the Nalgene under his arm and picked up the 9mm from the ground next to Steph. You know how to shoot that thing? Alex snorted. I probably qualified more recently than you, Admiral. Not that his time on Kansas was recent. But when had Hamilton last been assigned to a submarine? Probably when Alex's daughters were toddlers. Being a smartass will not help. Shut up, I've got an idea. Alex dug in his backpack for another container of coffee creamer. Was he a good enough shot? Got it. Steph jumped to her feet and snatched the gun in one fluid motion. Let's go. Come out, the French Marine shouted. We will not ask again. Footsteps shuffled forward. We will open fire. Can you shoot this? Alex brandished the coffee creamer. Steph paused. From your hand? Sure, but you'll lose fingers. Alex snorted. Do I look that stupid? You really want me to answer that, boss? Probably not. Alex ignored Hamilton's gaze. Why the hell wouldn't she run with the others? The fireball won't be as good as the one I made earlier, but it'll make them pause. He had 10 more cans of the non-dairy coffee creamer in his bag. Did Alex dare throw 2 of them? Sounds good to me. Steph bared her teeth. Let her rip. The threesome bolted around the corner together. Alex paused long enough to look right into the eyes of the French officer in the lead. He was young, blonde, and was that blood on his uniform tunic? His mouth opened to shout, green eyes following the rolling can of coffee creamer as Alex let it go. The French officer cocked his head, then jumped as the distinctive crack-crack split the air. Steph double-tapped the can, and a cloud of powder shot into the air, only to ignite a split second later. A fireball filled Cook Tube as Alex, Steph, and Admiral Hamilton sprinted away. 33. Jury-rigged. Brilliant yellow and white light filled Cook Tube as the fireball exploded out of the can of coffee creamer. Jules Rochambeau could see it from 100 meters away and ducked away as quickly as he could, plastering himself against the wall. A moment earlier, he'd paused at the intersection of Cook and Earl to call Camille again, learning that the Platform 3 elevators were broken. He was sure the Americans were responsible, but the explosion stole his attention. Jules sprinted back to the Marines. They were in disarray, reeling back from the fireball, taking cover behind storefronts. Several coughed. The civilians with them fled even further back, clumping together on the edges of the tube and whispering frantically. Several hid inside CY's cellular, where the Marines had forced the doors open. The air reeked of... artificial sweetener? Strange. Moreau was one of those hiding in CY's. Jules stalked in. What happened, Commandant? They used some sort of explosive, sir. Moreau jackrabbited to his feet, speaking in rapid French. I do not know what it was, but I fear leaks. What if... Jules looked back out into the tube, his practiced eyes sweeping across the overhead and the sidewalls. He couldn't see a leak, and, more importantly, his ears hadn't popped the way they would from a pressure change. If there were a major leak, you would be drowning. He snorted. Your indiscriminate use of bullets earlier caused more danger. Moreau's mouth flopped open like a dead fish. Where did they go? Jules demanded. Moreau shook his head. I do not know. We could not see them through the bolide. A snicker came from Jules' right. He turned to glare at Maria Vasquez, barely remembering to swap to English before asking, Is there something you're not mentioning, madame? Nope, nothing at all. She crossed her arms. I don't know Jack, but I'm enjoying the show. It's always nice to see the oppressors fuck up a bit, one of the older ladies added. The other one giggled before offering Jules a wide smile. He turned away before he could say something regrettable. Commandant, split off a team of Marines to find the other Americans, immédiatement, and then take these people to the cruise ship before someone gets hurt. Moreau cringed. Capitaine, the elevators do not work. Merde. Jules had not thought of that. Take them to Platform 4. I will have the cruise ship move. Its captain would complain, but what did he care? Better to take it away from where Bretagne sank the American supply ship anyway. Lord only knew how the civilians reacted to that. He would need to make sure Earhart's survivors were fished out of the water, too. Must everything be my problem? Oui, mon capitaine. Whoever selected Moreau for this mission needed their head examined. Jules turned to Moreau's second-in-command, Lieutenant Juliette Davot. She was short, fierce, and dark-haired, and Davot wasn't hiding in sea-wise. Lieutenant Davot will chase the Americans. Pick a team and go, Lieutenant. Moreau said nothing. Davot saluted. Oui, mon capitaine. I will find them. Allez. Jules pointed down Cook, wishing he knew all the places those Americans might hide. Again, he contemplated questioning Vasquez, but she was new to the station too. She might know her admiral, but Vasquez would not share that information without methods Jules found reprehensible. No, he would have to trust the Marines. He watched Davot's back with narrow eyes as the lieutenant selected 5 Marines and jogged away. His mission was not in danger as long as he caught the Americans. The grand sweep of history would not care how hard they made it, only that France won. Moreau gathered the civilians and pushed them onwards, heading around the bottom of Cook towards the Transplant 4 elevator bank. Surely the fool could escort a group of civilians there without supervision. Mon Dieu, he missed his submarine. Alex hated running on principle. Fool that he was, he signed himself up for plenty back in the day by attending a military college, but he made a point of avoiding the sport ever since. Still, swimming kept him in reasonable shape, which meant he reached the outer tube station at Cook and Few, only a few steps behind Admiral Hamilton. Steph brought up the rear, hardly even panting. Next outer tube in 1:30, Olsen said, glancing at the readout next to the doors. They were big silver things, set slightly back from the tube proper in an alcove. There was a roped-off area for the usual lines that formed, but the station was deserted. Shouts trickled forward from back down Cook. Alex tensed, expecting French Marines coming around the corner at any moment. Can't you make it come faster? Fowler took 2 steps towards Alex like he wanted to peek out of the station before retreating behind Olsen. Alex laughed, butterflies dancing in his throat. Sure, let me just override the laws of physics for you. There's no need to be rude, Gage said. Fowler glared. We don't have time for this shit, Alex said. They're right behind us. Slinging his bag off his shoulder, Alex dug for the other Nalgene. He'd packed it tightly, so the charcoal hadn't mixed in much. He'd have to hope it created a big enough bang as is. There was no time to fix it. Gage sniffed. "We've got 1:17, apparently." "When did you put on your asshole pants?" Bradshaw asked. Steph and Olson snickered. Hamilton opened her mouth, but Alex got in first. "Steph, wire this up to the light panel for a detonation 30 seconds after the outer tube departs." She snatched the Nalgene from him in exchange for her gun, sliding over to the nearest lighting panel. "You sure you want it that far off, boss?" Damn, she was right. Alex swallowed. "Don't shave it closer than 10. The outer tube's arrival and departure tolerance was 30 seconds off schedule. But 30 seconds was a damned long time when people with guns were chasing you. How long did the door stay open? Alex couldn't remember. More shouting. Bradshaw, cradling his injured arm, eased his head around the corner. "They're coming." Alex's hands were clammy on the pistol. Despite what he told Hamilton, he hadn't touched a gun since before Kansas left for deployment 7 months earlier. God, had he really been on Kansas 4 months ago? That seemed like another life. He chewed his lower lip until he tasted blood, then shook himself and pulled another can of coffee creamer out of his bag. "This is taking too long," Gage whispered, rocking back and forth. "This is taking too long." "Be quiet, Mr. Gage," Hamilton snapped, glaring at the time to arrival display. 1 minute, 1 second. Olson trotted over to stand next to Alex. "Ready to shoot, boss?" "No," he gasped out a laugh, "but I'll do it anyway." The shouting stopped. Was that a bad sign? Alex's heart pitter-pattered. Bradshaw snuck another look. "They're... Fuck!" He threw himself around the corner as gunshots cracked through the air. Alex met Olson's eyes as Steph swore and pulled wires out of the panel to shove into the Nalgene. He held up the coffee creamer. "Can you shoot this?" "I can try." Olson eyed the can like it was poisonous. "Is it going to do anything?" "Explode if we're lucky. Ops managed it earlier." "Then roll 'em." Crouching, Alex darted far enough around the corner to roll the coffee creamer towards the French. Bullets whizzed over his head and he cringed. Yet the world slowed down as the can rolled forward. Alex's eyes picked out 6 of the enemy. All were armed with long rifles, whatever the French equivalent of the MP4 or AK-47 was. "Attention!" one shouted, and the Marines dove for cover. Crack! Olson appeared at Alex's side, aiming for the coffee creamer. She missed with the first shot, and then the second. She aimed again and missed before Alex pulled her back around the corner. "Sir, I can—" "You can get your face shot, that's what." Alex cut her off. Had they bought enough time? 20 seconds, Hamilton said. Fowler stood next to her, bouncing up and down on his toes. "Let's go." Alex shoved Olson towards the outer tube. "Steph?" She typed furiously on her tablet. "Set!" The deck vibrated. The outer tube chimed. Under normal circumstances, Alex found the sound annoyingly happy. Today, it was the mocking chirp of an evil bird. Voices in French. Was that someone swearing? Alex remained precariously close to the corner. Ding ding da ding! The outer tube arrived with a song. Alex twisted to watch through the thick windows as it settled into the docking cradle. The external set of double doors opened first, and then another chime announced a good seal. Finally, the inner doors hissed open. Fowler and Gage bolted in, almost flattening Hamilton in their rush. The Admiral paused to let Bradshaw go, then Steph darted in with Olson on her heels. Alex brought up the rear, jumping through the doors a split second before French Marines boiled around the corner. "Get down!" Everyone dove away from the doors as weapons came up. "Come out!" a French officer shouted. "You are cornered!" "Close the fucking doors!" Hamilton hissed. Gage slapped the door close button once, twice, 5 times. "It won't work!" he all but wailed. Steph groaned. It's a goddamn safety feature. French Marines crept closer. This is your last warning. We have to do something, Gage whimpered. He pushed the button again. Nothing happened. We have to do something fast. Will someone shut him up? Bradshaw asked from a back corner. His face was pale and his wound bled through the bandage. He looked terrible, and Alex couldn't do a damned thing for him. And who the fuck think guns are a great idea on an underwater station anyway? Worry wanted to gnaw an acid hole in his stomach. Swallowing, Alex scooted forward on his knees towards the front of the outer tube. Shoving the pistol into his waistband, he scrambled upright next to the small control console. Outer tubes were run by a computer in Central, but international law required each to have emergency manual controls. Yanking the plastic cover back, Alex slammed his palm down on the red button labeled in 6 languages. Emergency release from track. Décroché! Take cover, Alex snapped. He didn't need to know French to guess what. A shower of bullets slammed into the outer tube as the inner doors slammed shut. Someone cried out. Bullets tinged off the far side of the compartment, ricocheting. The outer doors, thicker and made of steel, followed a second later, accompanied by the same ding-ding-da-ding. Alex snuck a glance at the telltale panel, where green lights claimed the outer tube's structural integrity was sound. Then the outer tube rocketed off the track, slamming Alex onto his ass. John finished his call with 7th Fleet and stood in stony silence, staring at the water. Bella Wood finished preparing the tow while Enterprise lolled on the waves, making little way. The smoke was thicker now, and the carrier had a distinct list to port. She'd eaten 2 missiles, enough to sink a smaller warship, but somehow Enterprise remained afloat. Inside the skin of the carrier, sailors raced to combat fires and plug holes. Unlike her older sisters, Enterprise had a water mist firefighting system installed in all her spaces, and that saved her. Although the explosions cracked some piping and vaporized others, there were enough working nozzles to put water on the flames. The fine mist quieted the raging inferno into a manageable fire, which Enterprise's sailors attacked with gusto. John slumped against the lifelines railing the bridge wing and sighed. 7th Fleet knew the truth. They couldn't do a damned thing. The Enterprise strike group was too far away to help, but at least John wasn't the senior person with a secret. Scratch that. His admiral now wasn't left holding the bag. Hard to forget about McNally, who sucked down a cigarette not 15 feet away. I guess a few ashes from that won't make a difference here. John wandered over. He was bone tired. Every step felt heavier than the last, and he just wanted to sleep. When was the last time he got any shut-eye? It was past 6 in the morning local time, and he'd been up all night. Shifting time zones meant he hadn't quite been up for 24 hours, but it was close enough. McNally stared at the horizon, his features slack. Now what, John? We shoot the rest of our harpoons and go home, I guess, John shrugged. They didn't teach this shit at the submarine school's prospective commanding officers course. Subcommanders shot the enemy and slipped back into hiding. Stealth was the name of their game. But how the hell did you hide an aircraft carrier who'd already taken 2 hits and could barely steam through the water? McNally shook his head. I just started a war. Another war. The last words were a ragged whisper. Here's hoping someone above our pay grade can figure out how to stop it before things get too ugly. John took a deep breath. But for now, we need you, sir. For what? John gaped, struggling for words. We need you to lead us. To do your job, he couldn't add. He expected to be yelled at. Instead, McNally slumped. You're right. Just give me a moment. The Admiral looked back at the survivors in the water, now surrounding Fletcher as the destroyer's crew worked to pull as many of them on board as possible. Fletcher strung nets down on both sides and had a J-bar davit working on her forecastle to lift any swimmers who lacked the strength to climb up to her deck. Meanwhile, Enterprise drifted forward as Bella Wood tested the tow. Were they sitting ducks out here? John was too exhausted to be properly frightened. They what? Jules could not believe his ears. He'd sent someone competent after the Americans, and now Moreau told him they escaped into the outer tube after exploding another bomb. Moreau spoke so fast it was hard to understand through the radio. Lieutenant Deveau is injured and may lose fingers. I do not know. Tais-toi. Halfway to Central. Would he ever make it there? Jules saw red. Not going back to strangle Moreau took a Herculean effort. Take your captives to the cruise ship immédiatement. Oui, mon capitaine. Moreau sounded terrified. Jules did not care. Instead, he stalked through Armistice Station's passageways until he reached Central. Admiral Carre was present, alas, and he was regretfully unintimidated by an irate naval captain. "Problems, Captain?" he asked in his hither-to-be-damned British-accented English. The man probably attended the Royal Naval Academy alongside all of Jules' pre-war friends and allies. Friends no longer. He shot a poisonous glare at Carre, wondering when the Indians would become enemies. It would be nice to sink the egotistical admiral. He spoke through gritted teeth. We. Lying would be counterproductive. The Americans escaped into an outer tube car. If you will excuse me, I would like to track it. Carre's eyebrows met his hairline. They escaped your Marines? Unfortunately. Jules twisted to Ada Ledoux. Madame, if you will assist. Of course. Swallowing, she pulled up the proper display. The station schematic took up most of one wall, color-coded by area and habitat. The outer tube track was blue, covered in flashing green dots. This shows all of the outer tube cars. There are 50 of them on the track, synced to maintain safe spacing. Can you track an individual car? Oui. Do you have its number? Jules glared. Ledoux wilted. Pardon-moi. Where did it... A flashing alarm cut her off, blaring and turning a section of the track yellow. Ledoux swore. They have ejected the car from the track, Capitaine, she pointed. Rochambeau stared at the icon accelerating away from the track, circling, and sometimes splitting through Armistice Station. Ledoux smiled. But I have its beacon. Très bien. Finally, something went right. 34. Rules of Engagement. Several moments passed before Alex picked himself up off the deck, muscles aching. How the hell does something this small accelerate so fucking fast? He asked no one in particular. His hip hurt where it bounced off the bulkhead to his right. He'd have a pistol-shaped bruise there when this was over, but bruises beat being dead. Holy shit, they got away. Someone shot me! Gage sounded more offended than pained, but red blossomed near the waistline of his sky-blue dress shirt. Fuck. Got it! Olsen scooted forward to put pressure on the wound. Gage squealed. Then the sound of breaking glass made Alex turn, watching as Bradshaw grabbed the emergency medical kit from behind its locked window. The kit was stocked according to IMO lifeboat standards, which meant it contained morphine. Dragging it one-handed, Bradshaw squatted next to Olsen. Let me do pressure, he said. You'll need 2 hands to give him a shot. Olsen nodded. Alex forced himself to look away. His subordinates could handle that. He needed to focus on the submarine he'd, more or less inadvertently, stolen. The outer tube car's manual controls were minimal, with emergency programming designed to pilot the car to the surface. Once on the surface, a beacon would tell Central and Rochambeau exactly where they were. Where to go? Amelia Earhart was gone. Did the oiler get word out? Was help coming? The entire U.S. Navy would crash down on Armistice Station like the wrath of a vengeful god after the French sank a Navy oiler, but that wouldn't matter to Alex's people if they didn't survive. Like Jesse didn't. Alex pushed that thought aside. Turning the manual operation key, he used the touchscreen to stop the flow of air to the car's ballast tanks. 3 more commands leveled the car out at 100 feet, and Alex drove it forward at 9 knots. The car rocked back and forth like a cheap civilian submarine. Alex's fingers danced over the controls, gently leveling it out. Quick math said he could stay at this speed for 2 hours before surfacing. Did they have enough air for that? He had no idea what kind of supply the outer tube cars held. Half the speed only gave them twice as much range. What kind of idiot designed the crap battery in this thing? Fantabulous, he muttered. Problems driving, Commander? Hamilton looked ready to pounce. Alex scowled. No, but we've only got a range of 18 nautical miles at 9 knots. 36 at 4 knots. We're sure as shit not outrunning Barracuda like that. I take it that wasn't part of the plan? Ma'am, I'm making this up as we go. If I could have anticipated this disaster, I'd be a fucking witch. The Admiral snorted. Anything within 36 nautical miles? Jack shit and nada. You're saying we're lost? Fowler slumped in the seat on one of the starboard side benches, leaning into the plush thing like it would save his life. He ignored Olson and Bradshaw working to stop Gage's bleeding, with Olson using a medical stapler to close the wound. Fowler looked almost as bad as his subordinate, pale and sweating, minus the blood. The wall behind him was decorated in pastels, complete with pictures of Da Vinci's diving bell and other scenes out of diving history, clashing with Gage bleeding on the floor. Nah, I know where we are. Smiling was hard. Adrenaline seeped out of his system now that bullets stopped flying, replaced by icy fear. The problem is where we're going. I told you we should surrender. Fowler sniffed and wiped sweaty hands on his trousers. Now we're going to die in some little bottle miles from... If you're in a hurry to die, Mr. Secretary, I can just open the goddamn doors. Alex snapped as Hamilton's phone chirped. If you're not, kindly do me the favor of shutting the fuck up. Fowler gaped. Alex turned back to the controls, studying the electronic chart and a schematic of Armistice Station. Their car, now a mini-sub, rocketed off the track near the old center of the station. Cook tube formed an oval, off which other tubes grew like spindly legs. Heading north would take them clear of Armistice Station within a mile, which the 3-minute rule said would take about 9 minutes. Getting away from the station in any other direction would take twice as long. I've disabled our homing beacon, Steph said from the maintenance panel in the stern, but it won't take a genius sub-hunter to figure out a search area using our maximum speed. And Rochambeau is a submariner, Alex finished for her. Steph's smile went taut. We can always hope French submariners are idiots. I wish, but his XO's no dummy. Vindictive and sneaky, sure, but not stupid. Alex scowled. Camille Dubois' neat little blame game left Kansas holding the bag for that nake's sinking, and it still burned. Maria texted me, Hamilton said. They're taking our people to a cruise ship on Platform 4. Alex blinked. We could make that. To surrender? Hamilton reared back as if he'd slapped her. I was thinking more like hitchhiking. A crooked smile creased his face, followed by hijacking. Hijacking? Steph gaped. You're crazy. Hamilton spoke almost conversationally. Alex shrugged, feeling strangely calm. Crazy has the advantage of being unpredictable. Well, that describes you to a T. The Admiral slumped against the outer bulkhead and shook her head. If we can get on board, well armed, I doubt the French would dare send a lot of armed guards, Alex said. And then we convince the crew to change course. That's a gamble, boss, Steph said. Alex shrugged. So swimming around out here. If the French want to hold Armistice Station, they can't afford to send half their Marines off with a cruise ship. I think we've got a chance. Sir, I've got 7th Fleet Actual on the phone. Captain Teneglia's voice was a whisper, and her face stark white. But Rear Admiral Marco Rodriguez jumped up and headed to her console before he realized he was moving. A half-disassembled battle lantern sat forgotten in his wake, its casing bouncing off the deck. No one noticed. Marco snatched the phone. Rodriguez.
Marco, it's Jonas Christensen, the voice on the other end said. Enterprise CSG is under fire at the entrance to the Somme. How fast can you get there?
Fuck. Marco swallowed his questions. My amphibs are already making best speed at 25 knots, but I can cut the 4 hours to about 2 hours 50 if I shift my flag to a destroyer.
Do it. We need shooters up there as fast as we can get them,
Christensen ordered. Call the bridge and tell them I need a helo to Morton yesterday, Marco said to Tanya. You, me, our battle watch captains, and anyone else you can fit in 2 trips. Tell them to bring enough uniforms for God knows how long. He returned his attention to the phone while she sprinted away. What the fuck happened, sir? I didn't think the Chinese had anyone in the Somme.
They don't. An Indian kilo spooked Jeff McNally and he sank it.
7th Fleet's commander sighed, sounding 1,000 years old.
Then an Indian SAG opened fire. 2 destroyers sunk, Enterprise is damaged, and the other escorts are almost out of missiles. It's bad, Marco.
The fucking fuck? Marco felt like someone dumped a bucket of ice over his head. He knew Jeff. The man wasn't an idiot. What the hell made Jeff sink a goddamned Indian submarine?
Jamming kept McNally from reaching out until about 30 minutes ago.
Christensen summarized the battle, while Marco took frantic notes, writing on Tanya's console with a grease pencil. At the end, Christensen added,
But now no one's answering the Iridium phone.
Double fuck. Marco swallowed, looking around at his suddenly deserted flag bridge. Admiral, I'll call you back once I'm on the destroyer and we're turning and burning north. Want I should send Lionfish ahead to sink any Indian she can?
Not yet. Hold her close until I can kick this upstairs. For now, fire only on ships you can positively ID as having fired on Enterprise and her escorts.
With all due respect, sir, that's fucking stupid.
It's a political decision, Marco, Christensen said. People back home are still waking up.
Then wake them up faster. I need some goddamned rules of engagement before I get in strike range. Marco loved math, and math loved him back. If the Indians hit Enterprise right after she entered the Strait of Malacca, that was still 700 nautical miles short of the Sunda Strait, which Marco's ships would take to the Somme. How far in Enterprise got before getting hammered would determine how fast Marco could find the enemy. Fuck, that was right on the edge of the F-35B's range, wasn't it? Tripoli was a helicopter carrier, and only carried 6 SVTOL, short vertical takeoff and landing, Lightnings. But 6 fighters beat a pencil through the eye.
I'll try to have something for you when you call, Christensen said.
I'm scrambling F-35s now, Marco replied. I want friends in the air if this is turning into a shootout. At the very least, they can get a look at what the fuck is going on. Christensen hesitated.
I'm not sure that will help de-escalate.
Is anything going to de-escalate this after they've sunk 2 of our destroyers, Admiral? The grease pencil snapped in Marco's hand. He threw it down and never watched it land. Christensen didn't have an answer, so Marco hung up and sprinted down to the flight deck to shift his flag to USS Dudley W. Morton, DDG-170. For once, The destroyer being named for one of the U.S. Navy's most legendary submariners didn't make him smile. He had work to do. Alex surfaced the outer tube car several hundred yards away from Transplat 4. A wave smacked the port bow, rolling the car like a dead hippo. Fowler, unprepared, upended out of his seat and fell to the deck. The politician squeaked and grumbled. Everyone ignored him. "You need me to take the wheel, sir?" Steph's grin looked almost normal. "Now that we're on the surface and all?" "Shut your face," Alex chuckled. "If this thing had a proper periscope, we wouldn't even need to be up here." Up was a bit of a misnomer. Not much of the craft showed above the surface. Wiggling forward, Alex craned his neck to see through the top window. He was just tall enough to make out the platform in the distance. But the big white cruise ship was hard to miss, even in the pre-dawn darkness. It moved slower than a blind turtle as the ship shifted from Platform 3 to Platform 4. Score 1 for Maria Vasquez. Steph slid up next to him. "Your crazy-ass plan just might work, boss." "Thanks for the vote of confidence." Alex tried not to let his voice crack. What the hell was he thinking? No way would this work. He was insane. "Don't chicken out when we're already committed, Commander." Hamilton didn't quite sneer. Was she eavesdropping? Probably. The car wasn't what Alex considered spacious. Alex twisted to glare at her. "The last time I tried to save a bunch of civilians, it didn't work out so well." Hamilton blinked, but admirals weren't exactly known for apologizing. She scowled. "How long do you think you need to get this ungainly thing over to the pier?" "Less time than they take to moor," Alex swallowed. Cruise ships had to be better at that than submarines, didn't they? Subs drove like drunk whales on the surface, but that big white monster sure was moving slow. Maybe having that much sail area made it harder. Besides, there were ocean currents out here, not measly tides like Alex was used to at naval bases. He didn't envy that cruise ship captain, particularly not if they succeeded in hijacking it. Alex ignored another poisonous look from Hamilton. She'd hate him forever. Fine. That stopped mattering 2 hours ago. 35. Illumination. 40 tense minutes after their harpoons struck the Indian destroyers, Bella Wood got the carrier under tow. Breathing felt easier. Nancy even sat back in her chair and contemplated making coffee. She and Captain Rosario already decided that shooting their last harpoons off at the fleeing Indians was a bad idea. With their defenses terrifyingly thin, they needed to preserve an offensive punch to keep the Indians honest. "Active illuminators bearing 292, Chief Carlotta Tomeo's voice broke into Fletcher's internal net. Chief Tomeo was the senior watchstander in SSES, the top-secret workspace dedicated to detecting enemy ship radar emissions and cracking their communications. 292 is Porbandar, Attar's eyes widened. "That fucking Indian destroyer! Kill it!" Nancy stamped on her foot pedal. "Bellawood, Fletcher, active illuminators from track 7065, redesignating Bulldogs over." "Surface TAO, kill track 7065, Attar ordered internally before Bellawood could reply. "Surface I, kill track 7065. 3 seconds passed. 3 too many. "Bulldogs away!" Porbandar was less than 30 nautical miles away, and their Indian shadow still had a presumably full missile loadout. Sinking the destroyers who already attacked them was nice, but not if someone closer could reach out and touch them. Finally, Rosario's voice came back. "Bellawood, roger, break. Bellawood holding fire, out." Fletcher's last 8 harpoons roared out of her forward VLS cells. Nancy's eyes flicked to the forward camera to watch them go, wincing as the kids' survivors dove to the deck on the forecastle. Then her eyes returned to her screen to glare at Porbandar's track. If Nancy's crew launched fast enough, They might hit Porbandar before the Indian destroyer could launch her BrahMos missiles. Shit, Atar whispered. Red icons blossomed next to Porbandar's diamond-shaped track on the display. These were the upside-down V's of hostile air tracks. They were too clumped together to count, but Nancy knew how many there would be. Visakhapatnam-class destroyers each carried 16 BrahMos NG missiles. That was more attack missiles than Fletcher had ESSMs left. She mashed the pedal down with her right foot again. Vampire, 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 track 7065, launching BrahMos, over. No one replied. No one needed to. Nancy sat tense in her seat, trying not to swallow. Now wasn't the time to ask how many ESSMs Bella Wood had left. They all knew it wouldn't be enough. 16 supersonic missiles shot out of Porbandar's tubes and into the sky, roaring toward the maimed strike group, ripping through the air at Mach 7. The only question was which of the 3 remaining American ships Porbandar targeted. Link doctrine designating ESSMs, Atar said. Nancy turned to meet his eyes, and her TAO shrugged. Flight time 30 seconds once they transition to cruise. Holy hell, that's close. Nancy swallowed and keyed her microphone for Fletcher's 1MC, or general announcing system. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Incoming missiles, brace for impact. I say again, brace for impact. There was nothing left to do besides close her eyes and pray. Civilians are done loading. Steph squeezed up near the windows in the outer tube car so she could see Platform 4 and the cruise ship, giving Alex's neck a break. I don't see a ton of Marines either. Brow still out? Alex asked. One of them, aft. Looks like it's got a couple guards. Are you certain you want to proceed with this insane plan of yours, Commander? Hamilton's expression gave none of her thoughts away. Did she expect him to run away? And where the hell would they run to? Alex swallowed. I don't think we've got a lot of other options, ma'am. He took a deep breath. Either we board that cruise ship, or scream for help and hope someone friendly finds us. Which doesn't feel really fucking likely. Should one swear at admirals? Shit, what did he have to lose? There will be hell to pay if this fails, she muttered. You can always stay in the car and nap, ma'am. Hamilton's narrow-eyed glare promised a slow death. I'll forget you said that, Commander. At least she had guts. That was better than the politician. Fowler sat and poked at the medical kit, his face ashen. Alex chewed his lip and glanced at Gage, who lay glassy-eyed between Olsen and Bradshaw. Half-conscious, he still had more spirit than his boss, though neither was exactly a prize to write home about. I don't think we have a lot of time for other options anyway, Admiral, he whispered. Gage needs a doctor. You're not wrong about that, Hamilton sighed. Very well, you have my permission, for what it's worth. Not that I think you were waiting for it. Despite himself, Alex grinned. I'll remember that, ma'am. He turned to his people. All right, folks, let's do this thing. Steph, you stay up forward. You're my eyes. Try to keep me from ramming the pier with this clumsy thing. Olsen, you're on the top hatch. Crack it the moment we're close enough. Then get lines over as fast as you can. You got it, boss, Steph said. Aye, sir. Olsen nodded, pulling down the ladder for the emergency hatch in the car's overhead. Admiral, would you watch the ballast tanks and ballast us up to pier level when we get there? I think I can handle that, Hamilton said. Brilliant. Alex turned to the car's controls, nudging it forward. His choice to lurk 50 yards off the pier was fortuitous. Now, the car crossed the distance in minutes. A berth across from the cruise ship was empty, so Alex drove the car there. But the stupid car still steered like a brain-damaged elephant, leaving Alex to wrestle with the touchscreen wheel, the worst way ever created to drive a submarine, and input most commands twice. Couple feet remaining, Steph finally said. Bring the stern left. You're about 20 degrees off parallel. Aye. Alex twisted the outboard motor to starboard, then amidships as he backed down. The stern drifted in, while the bows travel towards the pier slowed. What he wouldn't give for a decent rate of turn indicator. The car hit the pier with a thud, followed by an ominous creak. Fowler yelped while Hamilton ballasted up based on Steph's directions. Alex tuned them out. Throwing the outboard motor 90 degrees to port, he pinned the car against the pier. "Hatch open," Olsen announced, scurrying up the ladder. Alex held his breath, realizing too late that he hadn't sent someone to help Olsen with the lines. Bradshaw only had one arm, and Steph was needed up forward. Hamilton darted up the ladder. Topside, he heard her talking to Olsen, and 2 minutes crawled by before Hamilton's head appeared in the hatch. "Line secure. They're terribly done, but we don't really need long, do we?" she asked. "No, ma'am." Alex's knees wanted to go weak with relief, but that was the height of stupid. He still had a cruise ship to hijack. A flare on the horizon made John's head snap around. His motion beat Enterprise's 3 Sea-Whiz by a split second. Then, the port and forward mounts started spitting fire on full auto. Their loud, never-ending burp made John grimace. He didn't know how surface officers ever got used to that sound. He'd hear it in his nightmares for years. "What now?" McNally's whisper was raw. "They shouldn't have anything left to—" "Oh, fuck," John hissed. He knew what this had to be. Knew that it had to be Porbandar. That McNally's decision not to shoot the shadowing Indian destroyer was about to bite them in the ass. But there wasn't time to do anything but yank McNally down towards the deck, hoping like hell one of those BrahMos missiles didn't explode right in their faces. McNally cried out as John dragged him down. John hit his left knee hard on the metal grating of the deck plates, but he never noticed his coveralls ripping open. Enterprise's Sea-Whiz mounts continued firing. Fletcher's one remaining mount opened up too, as did Bella Wood. But the cruiser was too far ahead of Enterprise for a good shot at the missiles aimed her way. Her port side mount had a crossing shot at the incoming missiles, but Sea-Whiz's maximum range was only 5 nautical miles. The BrahMos missiles covered that distance in 3.8 seconds. Even the Sea-Whiz max firing rate of 4,500 rounds per minute meant Bella Wood's port mount fired just 285 rounds at the missiles aimed toward Enterprise. Fletcher, further aft, had an even worse crossing shot. The geometry just didn't work. She remained stationary, surrounded by survivors. It was bad enough that Nancy Coleman didn't bother trying to intercept missiles aimed at Enterprise with her forward Sea-Whiz. She reserved that for anything aimed at her own destroyer. Her 14 remaining evolved Sea Sparrow missiles shot out, reaching into the sky for last-ditch intercepts. Bella Wood pumped 6 into the air, all they had left. Enterprise trembled as John craned his neck, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening. He didn't need a tactical plot to guess that most of the Indians' missiles were aimed at Enterprise. They'd sunk 2 destroyers, but an American aircraft carrier was the holy grail of warfare. Missiles moved too fast for John to track, some exploding against the Indians' BrahMos, others streaking past them into the early morning sky. The world around Enterprise turned orange, white, and then black with explosions. Time seemed to slow. Enterprise's port Sea-Whiz locked up, out of ammunition, and the bow one slewed wildly, trying to pick up a trio of missiles the port one missed. An ESSM from Fletcher picked off one, and the secondary explosion from the impact knocked another BrahMos into the sea. But the third made it through, slamming into the carrier's already damaged port side. Enterprise jumped, surging right and up before coming back on an even keel. And then she heeled hard to port, her stern going right as her bow went left. Bella Wood shuddered as the towline snapped tight under massive strain, but the cruiser's screws dug into the water, and she took the load like a champ. Sailors fled forward, taking shelter behind anything they could find, hiding from taut tow lines as much as from the enemy missiles. That line could cut a sailor in half if it broke. It was a greater danger to the cruiser than the missiles aimed at the carrier. And all the missiles were aimed at the carrier. Watching Bella Wood meant John missed seeing a missile home into Enterprise's superstructure, slamming into her bridge and ripping Captain Edwards and his bridge team into smithereens. The shock wave raced out before the carrier's superstructure started to collapse and burn, slamming into John and Admiral McNally. It picked both up and flung them off the deck like children's toys. John grabbed for the life rail, missed by miles, and then cold water rushed up to hit him in the face, and everything went black. He never saw a third missile explode dead center on Enterprise's flight deck, causing her superstructure to topple port. It disappeared into a gaping hole with hundreds of sailors inside, including Admiral McNally's entire staff. The fourth missile was almost superfluous, but it blasted into the carrier's stern near the waterline, ripping into her aft engine room and tearing 3 of Enterprise's 4 shafts apart. Her outboard starboard screw kept turning for a few seconds before the carrier's nuclear reactors went into emergency shutdown. Lights flickered, battle lanterns powered on, and USS Enterprise went dark. 36. Trust. Getting Gage up the ladder and out of the car was a production. Procedure assumed injured passengers would be lifted out by rescue ships, not at the pier. But Alex lacked a handy rescue ship, which meant he and Olsen rigged a line to the pier and tied it around Gage's waist. When asked to help haul his subordinate in, Fowler wandered off, which left Steph to push from below, while Alex and Olsen supported as much of Gage's weight as they could. Gage wasn't quite unconscious, but he didn't provide a lot of help. They were all out of breath by the time Gage sat on the pier, chest heaving harder than anyone else's. Hamilton half-dragged Fowler back to the group, and Alex only caught a whiff of their conversation. "You will certainly get shot if you try finding a hole to hide in," Hamilton hissed, her hand tight on the politician's arm. "You don't know that. I sound like an American," she snapped. "Just like I do, and in case you missed it, they're shooting Americans down there." Fowler whimpered. Hamilton sighed. "Stick with me and keep your mouth shut, Mr. Secretary. It'll be fine," she said. Chewing his lip, Alex ignored Fowler's limp-limbed pout. He wished he shared Hamilton's confidence. They still had to get on the cruise ship, a much more daunting task up close. "You ever been on one of these?" Steph asked as they looked up at the giant wall of white metal and artwork. Couldn't forget the artwork. Norwegian cruise lines didn't ascribe to the subtle days of old. Colorful waves and buildings decorated the side of the ship, labeled Norwegian Dawn. Was that a good omen? "Nope. My wife and I thought about it for our honeymoon, but we were poor ensigns and had a new kid. My mother-in-law's taken a couple of cruises, though." "Me neither." "Looks like you're on point, Bradshaw." Alex glanced at the wounded enlisted sailor to his left. "What you got?" "Dawn's an older ship. Probably can carry about 2,000 packs. You said they had about 1,500 to round up, right?" Bradshaw paused for Alex to nod. "They probably chartered her, so she's empty except the evacuees." "What kind of security do they have?" "Nothing that won't run screaming from a pair of handguns. They aren't armed." Bradshaw shrugged, and then winced. "The rest depends on how many French Marines tag along." "All right, then." Alex flashed his team a grin. "Let's do this thing. Steph, Secretary Fowler, please help Mr. Gage." Fowler's eyes widened, but much to Alex's surprise, he didn't argue. What had Hamilton said to him? "I've got rear guard," Olsen said, tucking her 9mm under her shirt. Squaring his shoulders, Alex led their ragged group across the pier, his mind whirling with options. Be confident and try to bluff his way through? No, French Marines wouldn't listen to an American, not today. That left the stereotypical, clueless American. Alex's heart pounded in his chest during the brief walk across the pier. All too soon, a French Marine gestured with her rifle for them to stop. "Who are you?" she asked in accented English. We're, kinda lost." Alex swallowed, trying not to stare at the rifle. What the hell else should he say? Couldn't this Marine... "They told us they were taking us to the ship." Hamilton's fidget looked surprisingly genuine. "Is this the ship?" The Marine stared at Hamilton for a long moment and then relaxed. "Oui. Did you get separated from the group?" "Yeah." Alex bobbed his head. "2 of us are hurt. Do you have a doctor?" "Of course we do." The new voice sounded British. Alex's head snapped up. A ship's officer approached, scowling at the Marines. "Come aboard, please. Tell me what happened." "Someone shot me," Gage whispered as the officer led them up the brow. No one dared smile when the French Marines didn't follow. Alex just looked up, counting decks to the bridge. Yeah, they could do this. John never remembered hitting the water. Later, he realized how fortunate he was when the explosion toppling Enterprise's superstructure blew him outboard instead of towards the carrier's deck. But bobbing in water full of burning oil, screaming sailors, and metal fragments didn't make him feel lucky. His right shoulder didn't want to work right, and his steel-toed boots felt heavy enough to drag him down. Splash! John flailed in surprise, twisting right as a large white canister hit the water. Another splashed into the water a few feet away, and then a third. Turning to the ship, John watched one of Enterprise's sailors hitting the manual actuation on the starboard side life raft canisters, dumping them into the water as the ship burned around her. Other figures raced to help as the first life raft inflated with an ear-splitting hiss. The red raft erupted out of the white canister, automatically inflating. The covered raft was large enough to hold 50 people, and Enterprise carried 127 of them, enough for 120% of her crew. One look at the burning carrier told John they wouldn't need that many. Gasping and spitting as a wave smacked him in the face, John started paddling towards the raft. 3 strokes in, he almost ran into McNally. "Oh God! Oh God! Oh God!" McNally looked intact, but shocked, staring at Enterprise as she listed further to port. The hull creaked, and then a roaring series of explosions rocked the ship. John tore his eyes away. "Come on, Admiral." Talking and treading water was hard. His right arm remained sluggish. "God, what have I done?" McNally stared straight past him. "Come on!" John tugged the back of McNally's coveralls with his bum hand, pulling him towards the life raft. That made his shoulder throb in a funny way, but he needed the left arm for swimming. Luckily, McNally seemed to be a better swimmer than John, who didn't enjoy the pool on his best days. McNally made it to the raft first, climbing in when John shoved him. Clambering in was tricky with boots full of water. John flopped in on his stomach and hissed when his shoulder popped. A burning flash of pain rewarded him rolling onto it, but it faded as John scooted away from the opening. 2 more sailors crawled in, making the total in the raft 9. Wincing, John maneuvered towards the opening, peeking out. Enterprise burned fiercely against the dawn, sailors peppering the water. Frantic figures raced around on Bellawood's stern, hacking at the massive towing hawser with axes to free it from the cruiser's stern capstans. John knew jack about towing, and figured the line would snap before it dragged Bellawood down with Enterprise, but he couldn't blame Rosario for not wanting to find out. Something burned forward on the cruiser, but the fire didn't look bad from John's angle. At least not sinking kind of bad. He shivered. Then the tow line cracked and broke, sailors diving aside as it snaked viciously into the water. Someone screamed and never came up again. Minutes or hours passed. Enterprise sank lower as more sailors abandoned her. John hoped like hell the rest of the staff got off, but he didn't see any familiar faces as the raft filled up. He stayed near the entry, pulling up anyone who needed help, while McNally slumped next to him, soaked and pale. John's shoulder hurt less. Was he in shock? Red rafts dotted the landscape around the carrier, but John's was one of the closest and filled up fast. They were close enough to hear Enterprise groan again, steel shuddering and bending as the carrier rolled over on her port side, fires still burning as her bow rose into the air and her stern went down. John stared at Enterprise's red-painted bottom, bereft of words, watching as America's most famous ship slipped beneath the waves. Someone swore. A few others wept. No one commented. "What the hell is Fletcher doing?" one of the other sailors asked after several long minutes of silence. John turned to look at her. She was a chief petty officer, gray-haired and wiry. Ballsy. John followed her gaze, leaning out the raft's opening. "Damn, Nancy," he whispered. Seeing Fletcher was a relief, though. At least his actions, or his admiral's, hadn't killed his friend. The destroyer remained astern of Enterprise's grave. She'd been back there to pick up kid survivors, but now the destroyer crept forward into the waters around the survivors, tossing lines to the life rafts and towing them together. To his right, Bella Wood turned to do the same, even as sailors fought that fire around her forward 5-inch gun. Were there more enemies out there? Neither warship looked ready to run, but John could count. He knew their missile cells were dry. Did they dare stop to pick up survivors? Somewhere back along their track, John Finn's survivors remained in the water. Would that be John's fate? McNally muttered something broken. John didn't ask him to repeat himself. "Porbendar's going down, Captain," Lieutenant Commander Attar reported, "and the jamming stopped. Looks like it was her after all." Nancy nodded. "Very well." She let out a slow breath, ice coating her spine. "I'm heading to the bridge." She already watched Enterprise's last moments from CIC. Could anything be worse? Enterprise was America's flagship. Not officially, but in everyone's hearts, going all the way back to World War II. Nancy's feet carried her to the bridge without thought. She nodded mechanical greetings to sailors along the way without really seeing them. 2 destroyers and a carrier. 40% of the strike group lost in less than 3.5 hours. And John. God, how was she going to explain this to Janet if he died? Or to Alex? But she couldn't cry. There were sailors to rescue, and her ship remained in danger. Grief and worry would have to wait. Bile rose in Nancy's throat. She pushed it down, opening the watertight door to the bridge and then dogging it down behind her. Commander Ying Mei turned to face her, worry creasing the shorter woman's face. "Captain?" Ying asked. "It's time to shift gears to search and rescue." Nancy shoved the cold feeling aside. Standing on the bridge meant she could see the sailors in the water, see the bright red life rafts peppering the sea. Besides, it's not like we've got anything left to shoot, short of the 5-inch and Sea Whiz. Yeah, and no one's in range for those. Ying's smile looked strained. I don't know where we're going to put them all. Enterprise was the 3rd Gerald R. Ford-class carrier, which meant she carried a complement of 1,500 fewer sailors than the old Nimitz class, but that was still 4,500 men and women. Nancy's destroyers sailed with barely 300. Bella Wood was a touch bigger, but not by much. Would they even have enough deck space for everyone to stand? Her throat grew tight. That's assuming most of them survived. Counting the heads bobbing in the water was impossible, but it didn't seem enough. I don't think that's going to be a problem. We'll still burst at the seams with Kid and Finn's crew aboard too, and that doesn't begin to figure how we'll feed them all. I know. Nancy stared at the horizon, searching for ideas. But for now, we pick up everyone we can, starting with those not in life rafts. Aye, ma'am. We'll make it happen. Head down and supervise recovery ops, Nancy ordered. Was it cowardice or duty to stay on the bridge? I'll take it up here. Ying nodded and vanished, leaving Nancy with an exhausted bridge team. Had she really been thinking about potentially getting out of the Navy 2 days ago? Anything before the battle seemed out of another life. No way was she leaving during a shooting war. Her sense of responsibility wouldn't let her. Fletcher's bridge was unscathed. Somehow Nancy's destroyer survived the fight with only slight damage aft and 6 casualties. Nancy's job was to keep it that way. All right, ladies and gentlemen. She turned to face the watch team. We've got fellow sailors in the water, so let's get to saving them. Enterprise, this is Strike Group 7-4 calling you on surface secure, over. Rear Admiral Marco Rodriguez was annoyed enough to make the call himself. His staff spent the last 45 minutes trying to reach the Enterprise strike group, while USS Dudley W. Morton, callsign Mush, cut holes in the water. Rodriguez's new flagship strained and shivered as she worked her way past 37 knots. It wasn't as fast as Lionfish, out in front by 3 miles, could manage, but it was the best Morton had. She was the second ship in the brand-new Ernest E. Evans class, commissioned just 18 months ago, and already on deployment. Hell, her combat information center even smelled new. Marco'd never been on a destroyer before, and he didn't know if they were all this cramped, but stuffing his staff into the space, along with Morton's regular watch, made even a submariner claustrophobic. Tanya looked right at home, but she'd commanded one of these things a few years ago. Grace Hopper, Morton's slightly younger sister, steamed 1,000 yards off her port side. Both destroyers carried more missiles than O'Bannon-class destroyers like Fletcher, not that it did Marco much good. His navy was mean and bigger than in decades, but that wasn't enough. The U.S. hadn't commenced such a naval buildup since the years leading up to World War II, but Marco didn't like that analogy. It invited too many fuck-ups, as if what Jeff goddamned McNally pulled doesn't qualify. He growled aloud, swore, and then cut off when the surface secure command circuit fizzed. Strike Group 7-4, this is Bella Wood, over. Marco sat up so fast he almost fell out of his chair. Talk to me, Bella Wood, he snapped. Marco knew proper comms discipline and didn't give a damn, even if it made Morton's TAO cringe. 7-4, Bella Wood Actual. Update to last report to 7th Fleet. Enterprise, sunk. Bella Wood and Fletcher recovering survivors. Can you relay, over? Marco jerked his foot off the pedal that keyed the microphone. The fucking fuck? He twisted to stare at Tanya. They sunk Enterprise. My God, she whispered, her face white. 7-4, did you copy my last, over? Bellawood's captain said. Marco stomped the pedal so hard his foot hurt. Strike Group 7-4 actual copies and will relay. He swallowed. Bella Wood, I'm en route with 2 destroyers and 6 F-35s overhead. The F-35s will shoot at anything that shoots at you, over. It was shitty ROE. Normal rules of engagement shouldn't apply, not after an Indian strike group just spanked and sank multiple American warships. But no one wanted to stick his dick out, least of all Admiral Christensen, 7th Fleet's commander. It was the middle of the night back home, which meant the decision-makers were safe in bed, while Marco reached for the short end of a very pointy stick. No one wanted to take responsibility for starting a war. Fuck, no one wanted another battle. Marco Rodriguez included. But that meant he and his fighters could only shoot at someone positively identified as having already shot at American ships. We'll be grateful for any help you can provide, Admiral. A pause. We're going to need space for the survivors. We'll be there in about 2 hours, Captain, Marco promised. Any other threats in the area? And how many missiles do you have left? Fletcher sank the destroyer that took Enterprise out. The voice on the other end sounded grim. Marco didn't know jack about Bellawood's CO, other than she was, obviously, a woman. We're both Winchester on surface-to-air missiles. I've got 8 Bulldogs left. Roger. Marco licked his dry lips. Hang in there, Captain. We're... Strike Group 7-4, this is Kansas, over. Another voice interjected. Tell me you have some good news for me, Kansas, Marco said, twisting to look at Tanya. Weren't they up by Armistice Station? 7-4, this is Kansas, negative, the male voice on the other end said. French forces sank USNS Amelia Earhart. There appear to be no survivors. Over. Ice water dumped over his head would have been an ass-ton more pleasant. Silence reigned in Morton's CIC. Well, I will be dipped in horseshit, Marco said, not bothering to turn the microphone off. Tell me you've reported that up to 7th Fleet, son. Negative 7-4. We just came up to comms depth, over. Great. Marco got to share all the good news. First, he sent Kansas deep again, telling Chris Kennedy to keep his godforsaken comms wire out and creep in close to Armistice Station. Whatever the fuck was going on over there, Marco couldn't do a goddamned thing, so Kansas would have to do the old sub thing, lurk and listen. Marco just didn't have time to babysit Kansas. He'd have to trust Kennedy to do the right thing. 37. Eye of the Storm. Cruise ships' medical centers weren't geared toward treating gunshot wounds, but Dr. Anjou swung into action, helping Gage to a table and kicking the rest of them out of the room. The waiting area was small and covered in weird paintings, but Steph supposed paying passengers cared about that more than sailors going through the revolving door of the Navy's medical system did. She was used to bland, government-issue surroundings, but maybe paintings were nice. Cruise ships probably felt obligated to make things look expensive. A red-headed nurse patched up Bradshaw's arm on an exam table to the right, leaving Steph, Alex, Olson, Fowler, and Admiral Hamilton at loose ends in the tiny waiting area. Bradshaw was surprisingly brave about it for a dude who complained about everything out of habit. But Steph figured today wasn't exactly normal. Maybe Bradshaw would go back to complaining tomorrow. Suppressing her adrenaline was hard. Steph had enough energy to run a marathon, but she had to act normal. Scratch that. She was playing a scared civilian. They were lost little puppies, right? Tapping feet didn't fit with that image. But how could she stop herself when it felt like the gun tucked into her waistband got heavier with every moment? Not like they dared speak of their plans. Not with the nurse and one of the ship's officers staring at them. But she still itched to get on with it, to storm the bridge with their whole 2 handguns. God, this was such an awful plan. Too bad the safe one meant surrendering, which just wasn't in the Navy's DNA. Or Steph's. She'd rather wrestle a goddamned alligator, despite that kind of stupidity crippling one of her high school friends. Am I the only one tired enough to sleep for a week? She asked after the silence wore on for far too long. Only you, Steph. Alex shook his head, smiling. How the hell did the boss look so calm? Even Admiral Hamilton was twitchy and trying to hide it. We'll take good care of you. No need to worry, the officer said. I'm Staff Captain Ricky Marino, by the way. We'll get you rooms and fed. I can't help the barbaric way the French treated you, but it stops now that you're on board Norwegian Dawn. Will those French Marines stay on the ship? Hamilton asked, her eyes a touch too wide and her voice tight. Damn, the Admiral can act, Steph thought. Hamilton was a badass. None, if we can help it, Marino scowled. We don't permit guns on board. That's good to know. Hamilton's relief didn't seem feigned. Steph fought back a smile. Then again, no guns was damned good news, wasn't it? Would you like me to show you to your rooms now? Marino asked. I think we'd all prefer to hear Gage is all right first, Alex said, barely hiding his disdain for the younger politician. Not that they didn't all despise the man, except maybe Fowler. It was hard to tell with him doing his best impression of a lukewarm glass of milk. Still, if the boss was a crap actor, he was still rock solid under pressure. Remembering her earlier opinions made Steph cringe. Shame he's not a ship driver. I'd go to war with Alex any day. Were they at war? Steph didn't know. A French frigate sinking a U.S. Navy oiler was an indisputable act of war, not to mention the chaos here on Armistice Station and Jesse's death. God, she still hadn't processed that. She kept expecting Jesse to come around the corner with that same kind smile on his face, befuddled by Bradshaw and so eager to help. Steph swallowed. Navy ships were attacked before, even captured, without the U.S. declaring war. Would this be another one of those times where the U.S. acted in the interests of the world and ignored dead sailors? Even combined with the deaths on Earhart, Jesse was just a statistic as far as governments were concerned. What do you think the politicians back home will make of this? She asked without thinking. Hopefully it was a safe question. Olsen snorted. Make a hash out of things? No one missed the glare Olsen shot Fowler's way, but he just shrank into his chair and muttered under his breath. I think that's a question best left to history, Hamilton said. Was that a warning look? Fortunately, Dr. Anjou emerged from the back room before Steph could shove her foot in her mouth. Mr. Gage will be fine, but I do need to keep him under observation. At least that'd keep Gage out of the line of fire. Thank you, Doctor, Alex said, then turned to Marino. I think we'll take those rooms now, Captain. Smiling. Was that reflex for these people, or what? Marino led them forward and into an elevator. Steph clutched her backpack and eyed the outlandish decor. She figured she could drive this beast if she had to, but her experience with cruise ships was all from the outside. They lit up the night at sea like a freaking fireball, waltzing wherever they wanted and ignoring Navy ships. Did people really enjoy sailing on these things? Steph did envy the passengers their adult beverages, though. Maybe I can have a drink before we hijack this thing. After would be a terrible idea. So would before, but hey, this was all crazy. At least the elevator seemed normal, if decorative. She figured she could hack them in 2 minutes flat, assuming they didn't have some super special software. Contemplating that served as an enjoyable distraction from how she'd left a bunch of belongings back on Armistice Station. No way would the French mail her clothes or her growing snow globe collection to Louisiana. At least she had her laptop and tablet, but her best uniforms were back there, and the Navy wasn't in the habit of reimbursing officers for lost uniforms. Even if they hijacked the great white monstrosity instead of ending up as prisoners of not war. She turned to Alex. You think the French will reimburse you for your scuba gear? Not likely, he snorted. My wife's going to murder me if I tell her I lost her anniversary present, too. Steph laughed, hating the way it went high-pitched. What'd you get her? A kick-ass necklace from Mariana's Diamonds? Ouch. Steph wasn't the biggest jewelry fan. What you could wear in uniform was limited, and she liked rings better than necklaces. But the stuff at Mariana's was nice. Guess you bosses make the big bucks, huh? Not big enough to spend them twice. Alex's smile almost masked the way his eyes narrowed in warning. Steph tried to shrug an apology as they exited the elevator on the 10th deck. Marino led them forward again, producing room keys for 3 balcony rooms on the port side. These the staff captain handed over as they paired off, 2 to a room. Hamilton glowered as she accepted a key for herself and Fowler, but the Admiral got to take that one for the team. No way did a lowly lieutenant commander have to room with a politician. She was happy to share with her boss. That left the 2 enlisted sailors together, which would keep the Navy from flipping out about fraternization. Bradshaw seemed much more cheerful on painkillers, joking with Olson as they disappeared into their cabin. Alex thanked Captain Marino, and then he shut their door too. At least it'll be easy to tell when we get underway from a balcony. Steph glanced around the room. It looked like a hotel room, just smaller, with 2 single beds, a couch, and a bunch of drawers. She expected bigger, what with the size of the ship. Not sure these monsters announce underway like we do. Probably not. Alex stuffed his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunching for a moment. Check to see if they locked us in, would you? Steph nodded. The door opened when she tried it, which made her grin. The hallway was empty, except for a cruise ship employee with a vacuum. He waved. Steph smiled and waved back before closing the door. Being polite never hurt. Guess they bought it, she said. Yeah, now all we have to do is wait, Alex snorted. My favorite part. She shrugged. Better than getting shot at, I guess. He laughed. Barely. The beacon is gone. Ada Ledoux's face screwed into a ferocious scowl. She punched 3 keys on Central's main control console, then hit 2 more so hard Jules feared they might break. Even with a system restart, we cannot track it. What? Jules snapped in French, again wishing Carre didn't speak his language, or would just go away. You've lost the Americans? Well done, the Indian admiral smirked. Meanwhile, my navy has sunk an American aircraft carrier. What? Surprise tore the word out of him again. Jules spun to face Carre. Carre's 1,000-watt smile could have powered the Eiffel Tower. Enterprise went down a few minutes ago, joining their 2 destroyers. Our submarine is avenged. Avenged? Jules' jaw wanted to dislocate. You great fool, you may have started a war. Says the man who ordered a U.S. Navy oiler sunk, Carre snorted. And besides, they shot first. An aircraft carrier is not a lone ship, you couillon, Jules snarled, gritting his teeth. Governments can and have negotiated settlements following single acts of madness. Enterprise is another story. I am a student of history. She is America's pride and joy. Jules also enjoyed science fiction television and was not ignorant to how a certain segment of the population, one that cared little for the U.S. Navy in normal times, would hate the Indians for sinking Enterprise. Yes, and my nation sank her. There was no reasoning with idiots. Sucking in a deep breath, Jules turned back to Ledoux. Madame, please tell the cruise ship to depart. Bretagne will find the Americans when they run out of battery. Putting Hamilton and Fowler on Bretagne also meant fewer explanations for the French later. Jules figured his government could hold on to them for at least a few months, even if war didn't break out. But first he had to catch them, which was not supposed to be this hard. The car's batteries should die in 2 to 4 hours, Ledoux nodded. I will signal Norwegian Dawn. Merci. Jules ignored Ledoux, using the bridge-to-bridge radio, and called Camille on his phone. She picked up after 2 rings. The Americans uncoupled an outer tube car. Their last bearing was 327 at 1 nautical mile from Central. Get Bretagne underway and find them. What? How did they... It does not matter, he cut in, struggling not to shout. Find them. Camille gulped. Oui, mon capitaine. Jules slammed his phone down on the console. 38. The Hunt. Bretagne took in all lines and was underway within 15 minutes. Her crew, at battle stations since before the attack on Amelia Earhart, spun up the frigate's engines and engaged her controllable reversible pitch propellers within seconds of receiving the order. Commander Dubois and her team boarded Bretagne, with Camille stalking to the bridge while her marines formed a boarding party. Commander Adrien Richard was a classmate from École Navale, and, like Jules and Camille, hand-picked by Admiral Bernard. In fact, Camille recommended him. They were friends, going back to their days at La Baye. Adrien understood what was at stake. "The cruise ship is underway," he said as Camille came to his side. Adrien Richard was tall, lanky, and dark-skinned, sitting easily in his chair on Bretagne's bridge. Camille could barely make his features out in the pre-dawn light, especially with Norwegian dawn's bright lights blaring a few hundred yards away. "Oui, I can see that." Camille glanced at the pier. Bretagne drifted away slowly, using her bow thruster instead of tugboats. "She is between us and the Americans' last known bearing," Adrien said. Camille scowled. "Can you get around her?" She knew the water was deep everywhere around the station. Depth would not constrain Bretagne's maneuvers. "Not until I am clear of the platform." "Very well." Camille had no authority here. Adrien was her equal in rank, and she could only advise him. "Please, hurry." "Bien sûr." John clambered up the net hanging from Bellawood's starboard side, favoring his numb right arm. He didn't think it was broken, but it still felt off. Being waterlogged didn't help. At least it wasn't cold. Even at night, the water in the strait was around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That could cause hypothermia over days, but Enterprise went down less than an hour earlier. Bellawood cast off the life raft after the survivors climbed aboard, leaving it in the water for those who bobbed in life vests or clung to floating debris. The cruiser moved silently through the water as she turned towards the next life raft. How many were there? John's eyes were too tired to count. "Admiral?" He turned to the man at his side. McNally stood hunched over, arms crossed and expression blank. His wet brown hair pasted to his forehead while he stared out to sea, away from the swarm of survivors. John elbowed him gently. "Admiral." McNally only swallowed. "Admiral McNally?" The lieutenant in charge of the recovery effort must have heard John, and she bounded over, her youthful eyes old. The name tape on her uniform read Hunt, and her enthusiasm was exhausting. "Welcome aboard. I'll call the captain and let her know you're here. We can get you set up in CIC right away." Slowly, McNally turned to face Lieutenant Hunt, his eyes still dull. The silence stretched on until John cleared his throat. "I think the Admiral might need somewhere quiet to think," John said. "You mind sending us up to the wardroom or something?" "I'll take you to the captain's and port cabin, sir." Hunt's eyes flicked between them. Was that contempt directed at McNally? "I'll let the captain know you're there." John and McNally followed Hunt inside the skin of the ship, squeezing through passageways crowded with soaked sailors. Bellawood's crew guided the newcomers to every space available. If the cruiser's decks were full, the interior was far worse. Officers from Kidd and Enterprise spilled out of the wardroom, most as shell-shocked as John felt. Finally, Hunt opened the door to the captain's in-port cabin. The Bull Run-class cruisers, of which Bellawood was the second built, kept the traditional in-port and at-sea cabins, but most cruiser COs left the second cabin empty, unless an embarked flag officer occupied it. John watched his boss sink onto the bed, staring at a painting of the Battle of Bellawood. Part of him wanted to shake McNally, but what was the use? All John wanted was a good, long sleep, but there were sailors in the water and enemies out there. Did they have anything left to shoot? Captain Rosario would know. You want me to take care of things, Admiral? He asked. McNally didn't answer. Sighing, John ducked back out into the passageway and ran right into Captain Julia Rosario. She looked less composed than he remembered. Half Julia's red hair escaped her braid, and the circles under her green eyes said she'd been up as long as John had. But those same eyes were still sharp, despite the obvious fatigue. I'm sorry about Enterprise, she said. Did Ernest get off? She added, referring to Captain Edwards. I wish I knew, John swallowed. The Admiral and I were blown overboard when that last missile hit. Missiles, Julia grimaced. We didn't have enough left to stop them. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. I'm not sure who to blame other than the Indians, and maybe us, shooting that kilo. But it's sure as hell not yours. Words rarely failed John, but his tired brain didn't like the truth. Speaking of blame, the Admiral's out of it. You're in command, unless Ernest shows up. Captains Rosario and Edwards were both senior to John, and it made more sense to put a surface warfare officer in command now that they didn't have a carrier. Julia didn't smile. I'm not sure I want command of this shit show, she half whispered. You've already done all the hard parts. At least now you'll get credit. Saying anything more was tantamount to insulting his boss, which John couldn't quite do, even if McNally was out of his depth from the start. For now, let's concentrate on getting the survivors out of the water, she said. I need someone to coordinate that. Can you help? Bet your ass I can, John smiled. You just tell me what you need. My little sister's on Bellawood, Lieutenant Commander Hunt said. The XO stood next to Master Chief Casey on the far side of the attack center, away from where Kennedy paced like a rabid bear. At least she's still afloat, Casey cringed. Sorry, ma'am, that came out wrong. Beats being on one of the destroyers, or Enterprise. That news shocked everyone on board Kansas. The last time the U.S. lost an aircraft carrier at sea was the Second World War. That kind of thing just didn't happen to the best Navy in the world. Sure, the last 2 decades hadn't been the Navy's finest, and other nations' navies crept upwards in both skill and number of platforms, but the U.S. Navy was still the best. Fuck, Casey whispered. This has been a shit day for the skimmers. Yeah. No way is Earhart plus the Indian attack on Enterprise CSG a coincidence. Hunt shook her head. And what does Armistice Station dropping offline before any of this have to do with things? Good question, XO. Pity the captain wasn't interested in the answer. Talk to me, Sonar, Kennedy commanded, stopping pacing. Got a couple of ships moving, sir, Senior Chief Sally replied. One sounds like a cruise ship, moving on azipods. Other has traditional screws with a high RPM. Might be a warship. System still chewing on IDs. Kennedy scowled. Range to Armistice Station? 9,000 yards from Station Center, Sue replied. About 7,000 from the end of the nearest platform. Kennedy wheeled to glare at his hated navigator. I wasn't asking for our range, Nav. I can read a plot, he sneered. I wanted their range from the station. Sonar? Cruise ship tentatively ID'd as Dawn-class bears 355 from the station at about 3,000 yards on opening. Possible military contact bears 047, range about 1,000 and moving from right to left, Sally replied after a moment. Tentative ID, Aquitaine-class Frem frigate, probably D-650, Bretagne? Thank you, Sonar. Kennedy paused to shoot a glare at Sue, who didn't wilt. Good on her. Then Kennedy turned to Hunt. You think we found our shooter, XO? French frigate out near where Earhart got hit? Could be, sir, Hunt replied. We're mighty thin on evidence, though. Earhart reported being struck by French missiles. You see anyone else who could do the shooting around here? The Block 2 exoset has a range of almost 40 nautical miles. Hunt chewed her lip. Have anything else in that range, sonar? Bunch of merchants avoiding Armistice Station like the plague, Sally replied. Nothing moving that sounds military. Casey frowned. Sitting doggo was still the best way to hide from sonar. Subs couldn't hear things that didn't make waves. Could be a sub, sir. Better deniability if no one saw who shot Earhart. Sure, but why use a sub if your frigate is already here? Kennedy asked. No, I think Bretagne is our target. Target, sir? Casey asked as Hunt jumped. The poor XO just didn't know the captain the way he did. Casey expected this from the moment Sally identified that damned frigate. We can't let the French get away with sinking a Navy oiler and killing Americans. Kennedy crossed his arms. We know what happened. We have to strike back. Hunt's jaw dropped. Captain, Admiral Rodriguez's orders were... My orders from Admiral Rodriguez tell me to use my best judgment, Kennedy said, almost mildly. I didn't take you for a coward, XO. Fuck. Casey watched Hunt's back straighten, watched her face go red. Everyone else in the attack center turned away, remembering the last time their captain and XO disagreed on something. Kennedy wanted to shoot that Nake. The fact that Kansas's old XO hadn't let him saved his career. Not that it mattered in the grand scheme of things. The Nake got sunk, civilians died, and now Kansas didn't have an XO who would stand up to the boss. Casey's heart sank as Hunt shot back. I'm no coward, Captain. Captain, I recommend caution. Casey stepped forward. There's a lot of ways a torpedo shot can go wrong around here. If one hits the station, we could kill thousands, or worse. No way could he talk Kennedy out of avenging Earhart. 5 minutes under the captain taught Casey that. But maybe he could insert enough common sense that the idiot didn't make this worse. God help us if we put 2 fish into the biggest underwater station in the world. Casey shivered. His short-lived liberty on Armistice Station had been full of people. Merchants, sailors, drunks, vacationers. The idea of shooting holes in those thousands made his stomach heave. Good point, Cobb. Kennedy's smile turned blazing. Nav, put us between the frigate and the station. Nav, aye. Sue shot Casey an unhappy look, but what could they do? There was nothing here. Commander Adrien Richard wore a scowl that matched Camille's as Bretagne crept ahead, searchlights scanning the water. They stood together on the frigate's starboard bridge wing, eyes straining into the dark. No mini-sub, or what did you call it? Outer tube car, Camille scowled. Their beacon indicated they were on this bearing before someone disabled it. Bad enough that Alex Coleman outfoxed her back on Kansas. Camille might forgive that, assuming she could capture him, and his annoying companions. She was certain her country would give them back after America was suitably embarrassed, but U.S. Navy captives would enhance that humiliation. So far, France, and India, alas, captured Armistice Station and exiled the troublesome Americans and their allies. Sinking the supply ship was necessary to stop Coleman and the others from escaping, but now they could not even find them. They must have doubled back, Adrien shrugged, or submerged. Sonar conditions are far from ideal when I cannot deploy Captus. Yes, I am aware, Camille glowered. She understood that surface ships' sonar capabilities suffered from being on the ocean rather than in it. Bretagne's Captus 4 variable-depth sonar dual-tow array was a NATO system designed to survey 360 degrees out to over 70 nautical miles. Exercises against ships equipped with that VDS were a nightmare for French submarines. But Bretagne was too close to Armistice Station to stream Captus. The chance of the array getting caught on a platform was too high. Moving further from the station nixed their chance of finding the Americans. Perhaps conditions will improve once the cruise ship departs, Adrien offered. Camille hissed out a swear. Perhaps. Excusez-moi. Adrien went back inside the bridge, doubtless to avoid the storm clouds gathering in Camille's heart. She wanted to scream. How could a handful of Americans outsmart them like this? Where had they gone? She transferred her glare to where Norwegian dawn crossed Bretagn's bow at a range of 1 nautical mile. At least those Americans were out of play. Her country would transport them to Madagascar, a 3-day journey away. The diplomatic corps would handle the rest. If not, there would be war. Camille bared her teeth. It was time the French proved themselves a world power again. 39. Shell Shock. Destroyers didn't have a lot of outside phone lines, and when you tooled around in a carrier's wake, the CBN took up most of the satellite bandwidth, limiting them still further. Not now. "We've got to go back for Finn's people," Commander Nancy Coleman said more than an hour after Enterprise sank. She finally left the bridge for her stateroom, staring at the bed while she rubbed her eyes. It was 8:45 a.m. local time. Enterprise Strike Group entered the Somme almost 10 hours earlier, but it felt like a lifetime. Nancy hadn't slept in 26 hours, and her eyes burned like someone poured acid in them. Downing an energy drink just made her jumpy, but there was no time to sleep. "I know," Julia Rosario replied, her voice scratchy. "At least Tripoli's fighters scared the Indians off." The shooting was over. Nancy's feelings on that were uncertain. Part of her wanted those fighters to sink the goddamned Indian carrier. To hell with de-escalation. Those bastards killed Americans, and she wanted their blood. But the Indians had plenty of SAMs left, and they retreated when threatened. Tripoli's fighters didn't have enough gas to linger, and the 5 left from Enterprise's air wing had nowhere to land. Since they weren't vertical takeoff and landing capable, and lacked the fuel to get to land, those fighters had to ditch in the water, which they'd done 30 minutes ago. Fletcher's small boats rescued the pilots, and now Fletcher and Bella Wood were underway again, bursting at the seams with survivors. "Yeah, I'll take what we can get." Nancy shot another look at her bed, wondering if she'd sleep that night. The longest she'd ever stayed up was 37 hours back in her division officer days. Captains weren't supposed to break those records. "Same." Julia's sigh was audible. "We've got 1 hour until Morton and Grace Hopper show up. Can your crew hold it together until then?" "You bet we can, ma'am." A smile tugged at Nancy's lips. "We've taken the worst they can throw at us, and we're still here." "Dancing right on the ragged edge," Julia laughed. But Nancy could hear her exhaustion. If I'm tired, she's got to feel run over by a 2-ton rhinoceros. Even an idiot could tell McNally froze up and left the fight in Julia's hands. Thank God she'd been up to it. "Did you recover the Admiral?" she asked, not sure if she wanted McNally alive to face the music or dead from his own mistakes. "Yeah, Captain Dalton too." Nancy could breathe again. Blinking back tears, she sucked in a ragged breath before she realized how ominous the silence on the other end of the phone was. "Is there something I need to know?" "The Admiral's out of it, Nancy. Glazed over and useless as a dead fish," Jessica groaned. "Dalton's not a bad egg for a sub-guy. I've got him organizing and counting survivors." "I know him. He's a good guy. Not in the same league as Admiral McMicromanager." Julia's cough sounded suspiciously like a laugh. "Remind me not to call him that to his face." "I'm sure you're more diplomatic than that." "Not right now, I'm not." Julia's humor crackled out with a burst of static. "Not enough sleep and too much anger. Fucking A." Nancy usually tried not to swear at senior officers, but a captain wasn't that much more senior to a commander, particularly after surviving that battle together. "Frankly, I'm ready to turn this shit show over to someone more senior, but not someone who might get the rest of us killed, if you know what I mean." "I'll back you to the hilt, ma'am," Nancy promised. "Anyone with sense will, John included." Here's hoping the Navy has an outbreak of common sense then. We're underway. Maria Vasquez left the balcony, returning to the suite. No, garden villa she shared with Pam and Cassie, the two older women she'd accidentally befriended. The suite's opulence, complete with a grand piano, drove her to incandescent rage. If this was the French way of apologizing for Jessie's death, Maria preferred to shoot the fools herself. Pam needed 15 minutes to convince Maria to wash Jessie's blood off her hands. That done, she would have taken a shower if she had a change of clothes. But she didn't, because her dumb self volunteered to walk around the station with nothing but the clothes on her back. Her clothes were back in the Hilton, and the bag containing her personal phone, tablet, and whatever else she'd packed in the dark was probably back in the Naval Detachment office. Thinking of that made her think of her admiral and of the others. Would she ever know what happened to them? Maria swallowed. Hopefully without those French bastards, Pam said, seated at the piano. She didn't play it, just glared at the music. If our luck changes, sure, Maria sighed. You hear anything from your boss, sweetie? Cassie asked. Normally, Maria would bite the head off anyone who called her that, but she liked Cassie. Neither gaudily dressed old woman was the sort Maria would usually befriend, but they kept her sane and safe. No, she didn't want to say how much that worried her. We'll be out of range of Armistice Station's cell service soon anyway. So call her, silly. Aides don't call their admirals just because they're nervous. Maria tried not to swallow, not to admit she was terrified Admiral Hamilton was dead, or worse. Pam arched an eyebrow. Are you saying there's anything normal about this situation? No. Then I think the old rules go out the window. Call the woman, sweetheart. It'll be okay. Maria swallowed, then nodded. Call or text? Texting might not get noticed if the Admiral was in trouble, so she opted for that, typing out a quick, cruise ship underway, all okay on your end? The answer came lightning fast. In a stateroom on deck 10, port side. A pause as Maria gaped. 10630. What the? She whispered. Everything okay? Cassie asked. Maria ignored her as Hamilton continued. Come down to chat? Seems quiet. I need to go down to deck 10. Maria typed okay, then slid her phone into her pocket. Do you think the elevators work? They offered us champagne earlier. I think they're trying to treat this like a normal cruise, Pam snickered. Bet the crew won't stop you. Tell 'em your boyfriend's down there. Cassie grinned. Or girlfriend. I don't know what normal cruises look like, Maria shrugged. My underways were all underwater, and a metal tube full of semen. Both women laughed. Then grab a drink on your way down, Pam said. No one will pay you mind. Swallowing, Maria left the room, and then followed their advice when she passed a bar on deck 13, and the bartender offered her champagne. Unsure whether she should drink it or not, Maria clutched the plastic champagne glass until she reached room 10630. She knocked. Admiral Hamilton opened the door, with circles under her eyes and her hair a mess. Yet she grinned and ushered Maria into a stateroom much smaller than the suite on deck 14. Secretary Fowler sat off to one side, watching a muted television. Hamilton gestured for Maria to follow her out onto the balcony. Was that a splatter of blood on her clothes? Are you all right? Hamilton eyed the blood on Maria's shirt, too. Jessie's blood. She gulped. Yes, ma'am, I'm okay. This isn't mine. I think we can waive the formality a bit, Maria. The ever-by-the-book Admiral sighed. Today's been a day. Tell me about it. Maria glanced around, finding a table to put the champagne down on. No way was she drinking in front of her Admiral. How did you end up here, ma'am? Asking if Hamilton and the others got rounded up just wasn't diplomatic, But Hamilton got the hint. She snorted. Commander Coleman's bright idea. She rolled her eyes. We'll see how that works out. Do I want to know? You probably need to, Hamilton said. We're going to, well, borrow the ship. What? Hamilton explained. Range? Kennedy demanded. 2,400 yards to the frigate, still moving from left to right, sir, Sally replied. Real slow, though, barely making way. Looks like they're hunting for something. Very well. The way Kennedy stood in the middle of control, hands on his hips and eyes gleaming, made Master Chief Casey's chest tight. He'd seen this before, seen the heroic pose and the glaring overconfidence. He wanted to smack that smirk right off his captain's face. Battle stations. Fuck, it was real. Sailors raced to take their stations as the bonging of the general alarm filled the hull. There was no silent call to battle stations, not with Kennedy's dander up. Worse, he couldn't be sure Kennedy was wrong. If those French bastards shot up Earhart, they sure as shit deserved to eat a fish or two. Anyway, tactics weren't a Master Chief's job, and strategy sure as hell wasn't either. But he could still do his best to mitigate the clusterfuck. If that frigate's listening with even half an ear, Captain, they're gonna hear us, Casey said. Kennedy twisted to glare at him, and then blinked. They probably aren't paying attention, but that's no reason to be sloppy. Excellent point, Cobb. He grinned and leaned into the intercom. Maneuvering, Captain. Rig for silent running. Rig for silent running, maneuvering, aye. The engineering officer's disembodied voice replied. Firing point procedures, tubes 1 and 2, Sierra track 1098. Kennedy's grin gave way to a scowl. For once, Casey agreed with him. They were all still getting used to that blasted combat systems upgrade. It was nice and dandy to do things more efficiently, but did the stupid thing have to change the way they labeled contacts? Solution set, Wepps replied a moment later. Solutions checked. Hunt sounded almost as gung-ho as Kennedy. Lord, what did she have to prove? Very well. Kennedy struck that damned pose again. Casey hid his scowl by glancing at the combination of helmsman and plainsman they called a pilot. What an old codger I am, missing the Los Angeles-class boats. Was his dislike for Kennedy clouding his judgment? Captain, if we sink a French warship, they'll consider it an act of war, Sue said. One they committed when they sank Earhart, Kennedy snapped. Sir, we don't know for certain that Britannia... We don't have to. Kennedy rolled his eyes without even looking up from the plot. France took the first shot. What happens next is their fault. Sue swallowed. Captain, I strongly recommend reaching out to Admiral Rodriguez for orders. Your recommendation is noted. Finally, Kennedy turned his glare on Sue, who flinched but stood her ground. You have your orders, Nav. Can you follow them, or do I have to relieve you? Silence fell like a cold curtain. Kennedy's knuckles were white, his fingers clutching the firing key like a grenade pin. No way would anyone hide it this time. I'll do my job, sir. Sue's glare put a kiss of death on her career. Casey was sure she didn't care. That's damn good to know. Kennedy leaned over the plot, eyes gleaming. Make tubes 1 and 2 ready in all respects, including opening the outer doors. Striding over to the weapons corner, Commander Kennedy inserted the firing key. Key is green. "40. Integrity. The room had a coffee maker, which meant something was right in the world. Can you get online? He asked Steph, sipping at a chocolate-something-flavored blend. Chocolate coffee wasn't Alex's thing, but now that the adrenaline wore off, his body screamed for caffeine. Not without a credit card, she scowled. Stupid thing asks for our room number, then tells me we have to set up an onboard account. Well, that's one way to keep the news from getting out, Alex sighed. Smart when you get down to it. Give the evacuees all the food and alcohol they want, but don't let them get online. Phones won't work in the middle of the ocean, so bam, your secret is safe. Don't start sounding admiring now, boss. Admiring their tactics doesn't mean I agree with their motives. Alex opened the glass door leading to the balcony, mainly to hide the way his hands wanted to shake. He stared out into the lightening sky. We're underway. Fucking finally. Steph came out to stand next to him. Bang on 0500, too. These cruise line guys know how to keep time. Sooner's better than later. That frigate's still searching for us. Alex jerked his chin towards Bretagne. The French frigate was further from Armistice Station, about 2 miles off Dawn's starboard side, opening the range with the station so she could use sonar. Like most underwater stations, Armistice Station frowned on anyone using active sonar, even the low-frequency rig the Frems carried. It scared off fish and gave people headaches. You think they'll catch on? Maybe. Would it matter? Alex couldn't say. Steph clearly didn't want to speculate, so he kept his mouth shut. Knowing what they were about to do was nerve-wracking enough. I'm fucking crazy, he whispered. Steph laughed. What, for deciding to hijack this great white shark? The list is admittedly long, but that does come to mind, he replied, his heart hammering in his throat. Best of a bunch of bad options, Steph shrugged. Wish I'd thought of it. A knock on the door made Alex jump, but he squared his shoulders, slipped past Steph, and strode over to open it. Admiral Hamilton stood there, scowling, with Maria Vasquez and Petty Officer Olson at her back. Vasquez held a plastic champagne flute, twisting it between her fingers. Blinking, Alex stood back to let them in, shutting the door behind the trio. Where's Bradshaw? He asked. Politician sitting. Hamilton's frown deepened. Olson, however, grinned. He's high as a goddamned kite. Pity they're not sharing those meds, sir. Behave yourself. Alex shook his head when she laughed, gesturing the newcomers to sit down wherever they could. The 2 single beds plus the couch were spacious, and the smell of the sea drifting in from the open balcony was almost comforting. I'm glad to see you're all right, he said to Maria. I'm sorry about Jessie, she whispered. I couldn't. It's not your fault. Alex didn't mention that it wouldn't matter if it was. They were in this together, and another friendly and competent face was welcome. All right, Commander, Hamilton said after a pregnant moment of silence. This is your crazy plan. When do you want to move? Depends on how far we get from that frigate, Alex replied, gesturing towards the still open balcony door. Last thing we want is the crew calling for help. Hamilton's eyes narrowed. They can do that no matter how far away we are. Yeah, but so can we, Alex replied. Look, whatever else is true, they wanted Americans, and our friends, gone from Armistice Station. But they don't want us dead. If they did, no one would be here. We'd be in body bags. No way will they start a shooting war over a cruise ship full of civilians. All we need is to be close enough to some U.S. Navy warship that it calls their bluff. I think you're... Suddenly the deck under their feet rolled right, and Dawn quivered as she picked up speed. What the hell? Low-frequency sonar contact. Submerged contact bearing 252, range 1 nautical mile. Bretagne's tactical officer's voice rose over the speaker from the Combat Information Center. Camille's head snapped around, her jaw dropping as she stared at the bridge speaker. That was... Ahead flank, Commander Richard snapped. Right 30 degrees rudder. Bretagne's helmsman threw the wheel over, and the frigate shook as her screws bit into the water. However, her maximum speed using her electric motors was only 18 knots. Faster than that required clutching in her gas turbine engines, and even a nuclear-trained submariner knew starting those would take too long. What kind of submarine? She asked. Tentative identification American Virginia class, the tactical officer replied. I have transients, torpedo in the water, 2 torpedoes bearing 243. Action stations, Richard ordered. Notify the cruise ship. Camille froze. She could do nothing. She was a passenger on a ship she did not know. Her knowledge was intelligence and submarines, and not in that order. Why are they shooting? Probably because we sank their ship. Richard twisted to glare at her. He turned away before Camille could respond, ordering, "Shift your rudder." 1 mile. 1 mile was not far enough. Usually it was Camille on the submarine targeting the surface ship, and as challenging as the Aquitaine-class frigates were, they were never a match for Barracuda. An American Virginia-class was louder and slower, but their Mark 48 Seabass torpedoes were still faster than Bretagne. And they would crack the frigate open like an egg. Throat tight, Camille stumbled a step closer to the door leading to the bridge wing. It was open. Bretagne's crew, still rushing to action stations, paid it no mind. She should close it. "Range to torpedo?" Richard asked. His round face was pale and eyes wide. He could do the math, too. Bretagne's speed reached 18 knots. Below decks, her engineers raced to start and clutch in her gas turbine engines, but they needed another 2 minutes. "Less than half a mile." Richard's brown eyes met Camille's green. "Brace for impact," Richard said. A sailor repeated it over Bretagne's general announcing system. Camille shook her head, searching for words, stepping closer to that open door. The bridge speaker crackled. "Captain, sonar! American submarine identified as Kansas." "Kansas?" Camille spat, her jaw dropping. "Are you kidding me?" The explosion rattled the glass of the balcony door, shuddering across dawn like a tidal wave. Maria Vasquez dropped her champagne glass. Hamilton jumped to her feet and stared. Alex, closest to the balcony, watched as a giant waterspout engulfed FNS Bretagne's starboard side. The frigate's midsection leapt out of the water, arcing like a knuckle bent the wrong way. Then Bretagne slammed back down, keel broken, bow and stern each pointing to the sky. "Holy fuck, someone just ate a torpedo," Steph said. "The question is whose?" Hamilton's voice was iron, her eyes cold. "Who cares?" Alex shrugged when everyone turned to glare at him. "The problem frigate's gone. Let's move." "And ignore the shooting war that might have just started?" Hamilton crossed her arms. Alex met her furious gaze. "You think you can do anything about that right now, Admiral?" She didn't answer. Alex resisted the stupid urge to say more. One last glance at Bretagne showed both bow and stern sinking rapidly. Steph was right. Nothing but a torpedo shot would do that. Alex remembered a Sinkex back in his early days on Kansas, where one Seabass torpedo broke a decommissioned Ticonderoga-class cruiser right in half. Bretagne, though newer, fared no better. They were too far away to see sailors jumping into the water, but Alex knew they would be. Swallowing, he forced himself to turn away. Sinkex targets were empty. Frigates like Bretagne carried crews of around 150. How many were already dead? Should he not care because their friends shot at him and his people recently? The chaotic mix of emotions left Alex dizzy. He shook his head to clear it. "Come on, everyone else on this ship will be staring too. No time like the present to take the bridge." No one argued. Alex almost wished they would. "One good hit, Captain." Senior Chief Sally's shoulders slumped. Casey understood how she felt. Lacking something better to do, he walked over to the sonar consoles, grabbed a spare headset, and took a listen. Sure enough, the sounds of implosions, hull popping, and onrushing water greeted his ears. He remembered the latter two from the cruiser Kansas sunk in Sinkex, 2036. But her watertight doors had been opened to ease the flow of water. Bretagne's weren't. That caused the implosions, bulkheads giving way to water pressure and pulverizing everyone inside. "Fuck me," he whispered. Sally nodded, her eyes flicking to Kennedy. Their captain still stood in the middle of control like some goddamned action star, glowing with pride. She's going down, Casey straightened. There was nothing left to say.
Good job, everyone, Kennedy beamed. Now, maybe we can reach our people on Armistice Station. I'm sure Admiral Hamilton will be glad to hear from friends.
Not when she fucking hears about this, Sally muttered. Casey cleared his throat, heading over to stand next to Kennedy. Captain, I think we should probably also report in to Admiral Rodriguez. Lord only knew how the bombastic Admiral would take this news. Hell, maybe he'd cheer. Maybe he'd fire this glory-hungry son of a bitch before he killed anyone else.
Obviously.
Kennedy turned to Sue, still smiling.
Open the range to the station by another 4,000 yards and stream the comms wire.
Officer of the deck, aye, she replied, and then hesitated. Sir, should we help with search and rescue?
Kennedy waved a hand. I think Armistice Station can handle that. They've got more resources.
You want to go up for a look-see and make sure, sir? Casey suggested.
Good call, Cobb. We'll snap some old-fashioned periscope pictures while we're at it.
Kennedy grinned.
OOD periscope depth.
OOD aye. Sue's grimace spoke volumes, but she conned Kansas up to the ideal depth without objection. Casey wanted to let the beleaguered navigator know she wasn't alone in thinking Kennedy was fucking crazy, but he was the goddamn chief of the boat. Cobbs didn't breach discipline. And Kennedy wasn't entirely wrong. The asshat just wasn't really right either. Casey watched with numb horror as Kansas's modular panoramic photonics mast breached the surface. Calling it periscope depth was a nod to the rest of the submarine force. The Virginias were the most numerous class of attack submarines in the USN, and their always-up mast replaced the traditional periscope. However, even the newest version of the MPPM liked to brake if you drove too fast, so Sue reduced speed to 5 knots before nudging Kansas up those last few feet. The image of a dying frigate filled the viewscreen. Casey managed not to comment as Kennedy used the touchscreen to snap a slew of pictures like he was mush goddamned Morton. Then Kansas returned to the deep and streamed her comms wire, securing from battle stations while Kennedy got on the radio to check in. Only then did Sue turn the watch over to her relief and join Casey in the corner. "This is crazy, Cobb," she whispered. "You fucking think?" She bit her lip. "Did we just start a war?" "Fuck if I know, ma'am," Casey shrugged. "Wonder if it's too late to drop my papers and fucking retire." Dawn's bridge was on deck 11. No one stopped them from stepping off the elevator on that deck. Hell, there were cabins there. Alex hadn't expected that. He led his fellows forward as fast as he dared, seeing no security other than a locked door. It had a keypad. Damn. The door looked thick, too, like the bulletproof ones they used on airplanes. "I got it, boss," Steph grinned, gesturing with her tablet and handing over her gun. Alex took it before Maria or Hamilton could volunteer. Olsen already had the door covered with her 9mm, but handing any admiral a weapon still gave him the heebie-jeebies. Minutes ticked by. Hamilton's glare burned into his back while Maria fidgeted. Alex fought the urge to pace, wishing for something to chew on while his heart pounded in his chest. He twisted to look at the Admiral, who narrowed her eyes. "You want to move a bit further back, ma'am?" he asked. "I don't think these guys are armed, but Navy'll have my ass if something happens to you." She snorted. "That occurs to you now? I'll be fine, thanks." So much for that. Alex shrugged and glanced at Steph. She answered his wordless plea with a groan. "Yeah, I'm just about there. My program should—" "Got it. Bam!" Steph grinned as a click came from the lock. "Let's do it." She grabbed the gun and shoved her tablet into his hands. Alex's jaw dropped as he fumbled it, but there was no time to argue. "Olsen, you're up." Olsen was the only one qualified for this boarding team-type horseshit. She opened the door with one hand, gun already up, bursting into the bridge with Steph on her heels. Alex followed them, his eyes sweeping left and right. Floor-to-ceiling windows encased the bridge, with a pair of seats dead center and navigation tables in the back. It was wider than Kansas's full beam, dwarfing the attack centers he conned submarines from. But the number of people on watch was far smaller. One helmsman, an officer of the watch, and someone in the back by the chart table. All three froze when they barged onto the bridge. "Sorry to interrupt your regularly scheduled programming," Alex said, "but we're going to need to borrow your ship." "What?" The officer of the watch gaped. The shoulders of his uniform bore 2 stripes. In the Navy, that would make him a lieutenant. Old enough to know better, but not senior enough to be in charge. Alex shrugged, gesturing to Steph and Olsen, both of whom had their guns trained on Dawn's bridge team. "We're not keen on going to Madagascar, so we need a change in destination." We're chartered to take you there," the lieutenant said. "Yeah, let's not get into how your passengers boarded this ship," Alex rolled his eyes. "You want to complain afterward, feel free to whine to the U.S. Navy. But for now, 2 weapons to 0 says we win." "There's no need for threats," another voice said. Alex turned to face a short woman with dark hair and 4 stripes on her shoulder boards. She came out from behind a bookshelf by the navigation station, her hands raised. "We're happy to cooperate with the U.S. Navy," she said. "There's no need for guns." Alex glanced at Steph and Olsen, nodding. Both lowered their weapons, but didn't tuck them away. Without holsters, drawing them in a hurry would be hard, and Alex wasn't confident this situation wouldn't still go straight to hell. "Thank you, Captain Laurie Lawrence." She walked forward more confidently, now that the guns were lowered, offering a hand. Her accent was familiar. Australian, maybe? Something not quite British. "You are?" "Commander Alex Coleman, ma'am." It didn't hurt to be polite. Alex was fine with making nice if it got them the hell away from the French. He gestured at his companions. "This is Admiral Hamilton, Lieutenant Commander Vasquez, Lieutenant Commander Gomez, and GM1 Olsen." Lawrence's eyebrows rose. "All Navy? I guess you didn't get rounded up." Alex chuckled. "Not exactly." "I imagine it's quite a story," she said. "But one for later. So, Commander, where would you like to go?" "Let's start by heading east, and we'll figure out the rest after the Admiral makes a few calls." Civilians often forgot that cell phones wouldn't work in the middle of the ocean, and even Steph couldn't hack a SIM card into becoming a satellite phone. However, Dawn had satellite access aplenty, which meant Hamilton could call anywhere, provided Dawn's crew cooperated. Captain Lawrence led Admiral Hamilton to the back of the bridge, while Alex worked out a watch schedule with Steph, Maria, and Olsen. Trusting Dawn's crew was ludicrous, even if he wanted to. One of them would stay on the bridge at all times. Not the Admiral, though. Admirals didn't stand watch. 41. The Bad News Bear. Periscope pictures of a sinking French frigate arrived via secure chat like goddamned lightning striking him in the face. Marco, still seated in Morton's Combat Information Center as she approached Bella Wood and Fletcher, almost came out of his chair. "What the fucking fuck?" He would have sworn more had a voice not blared out from the speaker to his left. "Strike Group 7-4, this is Kansas, over." Marco almost broke the foot pedal from stomping so hard. 7-4, go." He stopped himself from railing at Chris Kennedy. Surely the idiot had an excellent reason for sinking a French warship when they were just about at fucking war with the Indians. Shit, did he know that? A chill ripped down Marco's spine. No one knew. He hadn't known until Bella Wood told him, and Kansas came to that comms party late. 7-4, Kansas reports sinking 1 French FFG. Same as sunk Earhart, over. "Tell me she fucking shot at you, Kansas," Marco growled, "or that you recovered survivors to prove it, over." Tanya's gasp from his right made Marco's head turn. Her face was ashen. God, it'll be the Kansas incident all over again if they can't prove it. With the same fucking submarine. Marco wanted to reach through the radio waves and strangle Chris Kennedy. What kind of flaming moron put himself in a position to do the same thing he was accused of doing 6 months ago? -74, there appears to be no Earhart survivors. Over, Kennedy replied. Roger. Marco took a deep breath to stop himself from swearing. Make best speed to rendezvous with Morton. Over. He needed this idiot somewhere controllable. Kansas Roger, out. Marco ripped off his headset. Fuckity fuck! We are goddamn screwed if this turns into a 3-way war. Or better yet, 2-way, with France and India against us. Don't forget China, Tanya said, chewing her lip. We thought we'd be shooting at them today, not India and France. Marco closed his eyes, willing those periscope photos to disappear. Christ, that French frigate was trashed. Half her crew was probably dead, along with all of Earhart's. Don't fucking remind me. Admiral, we've reached survivors in the water, Commander Anthony Tillman, Morton's CO, called down from the bridge. Pick 'em up. Marco's eyes snapped open. I'll be on deck in a sec. No fucking way was he going to leave Morton's crew to pick American sailors up alone. He wouldn't be very useful, but Marco Rodriguez was damned well going to be there to help. He was 2 steps from the door when Tanya called, Admiral, we've got a call on the POTS line for you. Caller says she's Admiral Hamilton. Come again, what? Shrugging, Tanya held out the phone. Marco stopped back over and grabbed it. Freddy, what the fuck? Aren't you down on Armistice? Oh. Oh isn't the half of it, Marco, his old friend replied. Freddy and Marco served together back on their first boat, starting as frenemies who grew closer. Back when women were first allowed on submarines, the young officers in the first wave endured everyone's unease, along with a shit ton of resistance from the good old boys club. Their fellow junior officers didn't like Freddy. She was too assertive, too focused, too damn good at her job. And Marco became her friend almost by default when he treated her like a human fucking being. You gonna make me wait, woman? He growled. Well, we just hijacked a cruise ship, she said, and 7th Fleet bounced me to you. I'm on Norwegian Dawn with about 1,500 other Americans, Brits, Canadians, and Aussies. The French rounded everyone up and kicked us off Armistice Station. It wasn't often something stunned Marco into silence. He shook his head like a punch-drunk fighter. And you hijacked it? Technically, it wasn't my idea, she sighed. Never mind that. 7th Fleet said you might need room for survivors. Damn straight I do. How fast can your cruise ship go? About 25 knots. We're already headed towards you. Marco grinned. Now you're talking. John was on Bella Wood's deck when Dudley W. Morton and Grace Hopper arrived, too absorbed in recovery operations to notice them until Morton slid to a stop 200 yards off the cruiser's port beam. Immediately, both destroyers dropped their boats in the water and threw lines to nearby life rafts. Bellawood and Fletcher already recovered all the swimmers, but there were still close to 100 life rafts in the water, and that didn't count John Finn's survivors already on board Martin and Hopper. Helicopters crisscrossed in the air over the ragged formation, guarding against a resurgent Indian threat. John tried to ignore that, focusing on rescuing survivors. The new destroyers could handle the inevitable shootout. At least they had missiles to shoot. The attack never came. The sun started sinking below the horizon as the last survivors from Kidd climbed the net onto Bellawood, exhausted, hungry, and grateful. John took their names. Lieutenant Hunt handed them sandwiches and bottled water, and then a petty officer led them down to the mess decks. The destroyer was full to bursting. Nearly 2/3 of Enterprise's crew of 5,000 survived, plus 367 off Kidd and John Finn combined. scattering 3,724 survivors across a cruiser and 3 destroyers, each of which was designed to carry a maximum crew of 350, meant people in every rack, corner, and chair. Everywhere except Admiral McNally's cabin, where John didn't care to return to. Instead, he ate a sandwich sitting on a bollard on the aft missile deck, staring at the sunset. Sipping a soda, John wondered if he could convince Captain Rosario to crack open Bellawood's liquor locker. A drink might loosen everyone up, and who cared about rules at this point? He ignored the announcement over the cruiser's 1MC. Expeditionary Strike Group 7-4 arriving. Not tonight, but tomorrow. A beer or two might take the edge off for folks feeling claustrophobic and mourning friends. Giving people too much might cause fights, but with an extra 900 plus on each ship, they needed. "You look like dog shit run over by a tricycle, Captain." John's head snapped up, taking in a short Hispanic man wearing coveralls. His arms were crossed, but they didn't hide the double row of scrambled eggs on his Tripoli ball cap, or the stars on his uniform collar. Or his name, thankfully. John was too tired to recognize admirals other than his own. "Admiral Rodriguez." Blinking, John staggered to his feet. Oh, you came with Morton and Hopper." Rodriguez's grin was tired. "Right in one. When's the last time you slept, son?" "Sometime 2 days ago," John shrugged. "Depending on what day it is." "Still 14 April. At least this side of the dayline." "I guess that's something." That meant they entered the Somme about 18 hours ago. John couldn't wrap his mind around how much happened since then. The rest of McNally's staff was dead. Ernest Edwards was dead. 2,000 American sailors were dead. God knew how many Indians followed them to the grave, mostly on his orders. "Are we at war, sir?" "Fuck if I know. That's above my pay grade. The politicians are awake and we've stopped shooting, so your guess is as good as mine," Rodriguez sighed. "Now, let's talk about the great goddamned pink elephant in the room. Your boss." John swallowed. "I'm not sure that's my place." "Captain, Jeff McNally is senior to me, but unless you say he's fit to command this goat rope, I'm what you've got. Captain Rosario tells me he checked the fuck out a few hours ago and left the two of you holding the bag. That true?" "Yes, sir." John wouldn't lie. Seventh Fleet implied that he didn't do jack during the battle either, aside from shooting that fucking kilo and kicking the entire shebang off. "That's accurate," John grimaced. "Captain Rosario handled the air battle. I did the rest, but not, well enough." John never denied ambition. The son of a retired admiral and Air Force general, he wanted to earn more stars than his parents combined. Not like this, though. He didn't know if he could have done better. There hadn't been time to think, to plan. He wasn't trained for missile combat, and while he'd done okay, John knew he'd dream of 2,000 dead sailors for the rest of his life. He shivered. "Shit, son. From what Rosario says, you're half the reason those 2 ships are still floating. Don't sell yourself short. There'll be plenty of numbnuts who'll do that for you." Rodriguez barked a laugh. "McNally fucking freeze?" "Yeah." "You gonna bitch if I take over?" "No, sir." Words didn't exist to describe how good it felt to have someone other than McNally as senior officer. John couldn't bet on his boss staying quiet, and he didn't have the energy to keep coddling Admiral McNally. "Good, 'cause Captain Rosario looked damned happy about it, and I'd hate to disappoint a lady." Rodriguez's grin was infectious. Tired or not, John smiled back. "Besides, I've got a big damned cruise ship rolling this way to relieve the crowding." John stared. "A cruise ship?" "It pays to have friends in weird places, son." Commander Camille Dubois was waterlogged and furious. Jules, standing on Barracuda's aft deck, instead of conning his submarine, offered her a hand as she scrambled out of the water. It was Kansas. She wrung her sleeves out, flinging water everywhere. We must go after them.
They're long gone, mon ami. Jules grimaced, probably with Admiral Hamilton and friends.
And Coleman, Camille spat. Damn him.
Oui. Come below and change.
He arched an eyebrow when she snarled obscenities, and Camille subsided. They threaded their way through the submarine. Crew members watched Camille warily. Their XO had a temper, and everyone knew it. Jules disliked her petulant displays at the best of times, but she was good at her job. He waited in his stateroom, next door to hers, as was customary on attack submarines, until Camille replaced her cold and wet clothing. Meanwhile, his crew continued fishing Bretagn's survivors out of the water. There were few. Torpedo strikes did that. Camille slipped into the captain's stateroom without knocking. What are our orders, mon capitaine?
We remain near Armistice Station. The Marines are leaving now that our opponents are gone. But we remain to ensure the Americans do not get feisty, he grinned.
It appears they have their hands full with our Indian friends anyway. The battle was not as one-sided as Admiral Carré believed. Camille snorted. My heart weeps for him.
Moi aussi.
We are supposed to let them get away? Camille's green eyes narrowed. Can we not pursue Kansas? Sink them before...
No. We follow orders, and we will fight another day.
Jules would not mind exacting revenge for Bretagne, but Kansas was not a target to get worked up over. He outfoxed Commander Kennedy and his crew once. Doing so a second time would be simple. Perhaps someday they would give Commander Coleman a submarine. That was a contest Jules could look forward to. I'm not sure how I feel about this, Commander. Captain Lawrence pursed her lips, staring out at the sea as Dawn steamed at 26 knots. Dawn's captain and Alex stood on the cruise ship's bridge wing. Alex had a 9mm he didn't need tucked into his waistband. Dawn's crew grew more cooperative by the moment, particularly after they heard about the Indian attack on Enterprise. At least you're getting paid. That's corporate's concern, not mine, she grimaced. I don't like bringing my ship into a war zone. Your refugees may not be my normal paying passengers, but they're still civilians. And so's your crew. Exactly. Alex smiled crookedly. We're not at war, technically. You keep saying that. Lawrence sighed. You been watching the news? What this time? Alex almost didn't want to know. Steph plugged into the internet, downing news like a junkie, but he spent the time he wasn't on Dawn's bridge catching up on sleep. That and explaining the insanity of the last 2 days to his wife. Almost 48 hours passed since Dawn's so-called hijacking. Admiral Hamilton's quick thinking led the United States to outbid the French charter for the cruise ship, a deed helped along by Norwegian Cruise Line's Miami, Florida headquarters. No one really thought Dawn's captain or crew would betray them to the French, but Alex and his people still kept watch on the bridge, just in case. China threatened to nuke Taiwan this morning. Alex's heart threatened to jump out his mouth. What? Lawrence extended out a tablet. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Watch. Swallowing, Alex hit play on the cued CNN video. The reporter was young and blonde, standing outside the UN headquarters in New York. The UN Security Council remains in an emergency meeting. An estimated 200,000 people have died already in the growing Chinese Civil War, while Taiwan has requested US and UN assistance. India, Malaysia, and 7 other nations have declared the Strait of Malacca closed to all American allied shipping, not just naval vessels. Just this morning, an Australian frigate was fired upon by Indian destroyers in the Java Sea. She touched her earbud. This just in. France has proposed a UN resolution condemning the United States for sinking an Indian Kilo-class submarine just 2 days ago. Russia has seconded the motion and demanded the United States pay reparations to the dead crew's families. The U.S. has vetoed. Tensions continue to rise in the Indian Ocean. Just an hour ago, crew members of the cargo ships MV Jupiter and MV Rose were pulled from the sea by an Australian-flagged tanker. Their surviving crews report both ships were sunk by an Indian submarine in the approaches to the Strait of Malacca, and over half of the sailors from each ship are dead. Americans, waking up to this news, are furious, and the president has scheduled a press conference for this afternoon. The video ended, leaving Alex winded, chest tight. This is getting out of control. You see why I don't want to go anywhere near there, Lawrence said, even with my Panamanian flag flying as high as I can manage. No one in their right mind will sink a cruise ship, Alex said. Or 2 cargo ships? She gestured at the tablet again. There are already protests outside the Indian embassy in D.C. Shit. Alex scrubbed a hand over his face. He needed a shave. In a word, yes. Her smile was strained. I'm just glad we're chartered to head to Australia after this. The escort won't hurt, I'm sure. Alex nodded towards the cruiser and 3 destroyers just cresting the horizon. From here, they couldn't see the battle scars on the ships. They were small gray blobs, roaring in at 30 knots. The moment they arrived, his job would be done. Alex would become one of many naval officers on Dawn, and not even the second most senior. Then he could be normal. You okay, boss? Alex turned as Steph approached, her eyes also on the incoming ships. Yeah, it's weird knowing this is just about over. Weird like, holy shit, your crazy plan worked and you saved a couple thousand people? She grinned. I wouldn't put it that way. Alex swallowed. We just did what needed doing, and it wasn't just me. Steph laughed. Keep telling yourself that, sir. I'm pretty sure Navy'll stick some medal on you or another for this. Alex shook his head. Don't make me out to be some hero, Steph. I was scared shitless. Taking over a cooperative cruise ship isn't heroic. It's practical. Practical was a label Alex Coleman could live with. Hero was one he didn't want. 42. Epilogue. War. Watching the personnel transfer got boring very quickly. No one on the cruise ship needed Alex to organize anything, and his little hijacking was quickly deemed fiction once the U.S. government chartered Dawn. Avoiding Admiral Hamilton remained in his best interest, so it took longer than it should have for Alex to learn one of the battle-scarred destroyers was USS Fletcher. Fortunately, free phone calls were part of Dawn's new contract, so Alec punched up the external phone line that he knew led to the CO's cabin on board Fletcher, his heart in his throat. How didn't I think of it? He wanted to smash his head into something. I knew Nancy's ship was going through the Somme. How did I fail to make the connection? 1 ring. 2. 4, and then 6. The Navy wasn't a big believer in voicemail, so Alex let it ring another 2 times, swallowing back the need to swear. Finally, a groggy voice answered, Captain? Nancy? Shit, babe, it's good to hear your voice. He could hear blankets rustling as she sat up. Alex, what the hell? Where are you? I saw some worrisome messages about Armistice Station. About 1,000 yards dead ahead of you. Long story. I'm on Dawn. What? I could ask you the same thing. I heard it got pretty fucking busy there. Alex couldn't find words to voice his relief. The survivors on board Dawn, a mix of crew from Enterprise, John Finn, and Kidd, told hazy stories about a submarine sunk, an all-out missile battle, and a carrier and 2 destroyers now on the bottom. That's one way to put it, Nancy replied. Another is that if I ever work for another sub-admiral again, it's too fucking soon. Alex blinked. I'm definitely missing something here. "We shot first, Alex," she whispered. "We sank an Indian submarine without properly identifying it, all because Admiral McNumbnuts couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. We lost 3 ships and almost 2,000 sailors, and for what?" "I wish I knew what to say, Nance." "Me too," she sighed. "I don't know what's going to happen." "Me neither." 15 April 2038, 1100 hours, Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. The Speaker of the House sat as the President walked to the podium, old-fashioned printed notes in hand. There wasn't time to put this speech on the teleprompter, not with the crowds gathered outside the Capitol. The House galleries were full for the first time in recent memory, and protesters still shouted outside the Indian embassy. News of Armistice Station's capture, no one called it anything else, not in the U.S., further inflamed public opinion. Then, for the first time since World War II, enemy fire sank American Navy ships. Civilians were dead, both on the cargo ships and on Armistice Station. No one cared that Admiral McNally took the first shot. Not in the U.S. The President cleared his throat, and then looked into the cameras. He had no idea his tie was crooked, and this appearance was scheduled so quickly none of his aides remembered to check. No one cared.
My fellow Americans, I come before you today with a grave duty. 1,900 American sailors lie dead in the Strait of Malacca, slain by Indian naval forces without declaration of war. 30 additional Americans are dead in the Indian Ocean, sunk by an Indian submarine without warning. 140 more naval personnel died when attacked by the French Navy, and then 2 more American civilians were slain by French Marines on Armistice Station. That's 2,096 American lives, snuffed out by those we thought friends, all in the last 48 hours. 2,096. This must be stopped. France and India have declared the Strait of Malacca closed to American shipping. They have ejected all American, British, Canadian, and Australian citizens from Armistice Station, the largest underwater habitat in the world. And they have killed our people. But the United States of America has never stood idle while acts of aggression are unanswered. The United States of America fights for our people, and if we must, to avenge them. No one spoke. No one could believe it. Not in the modern world. First world countries did not make war upon one another. Nuclear countries, of which both France and India were, did not come to blows with other nuclear-armed nations. But America only knew one way to answer violence. Ladies and gentlemen of Congress, I hereby request that Congress pass an act of war against the Republic of France and the Republic of India. 23:30 hours, the Indian Ocean. FNS Barracuda received the news via old-fashioned naval message. Captain Jules Rochambeau read it, handed the tablet to his second-in-command, and headed for control. Within minutes, his attack submarine turned around and came up in speed. "You were right," Camille said, joining him. "I usually am." Jules smiled, a strange feeling sneaking over him. He should be angry. War meant a failure of his operation. Yet, war also represented a glittering future in which France could regain lost glory. Not since the days of Napoleon had the French been so strong. Soon, the world would fear French naval might once more, with Jules Rochambeau at the forefront. Camille licked her lips. "We will have much work ahead of us." Jules leaned against the chart table, his mind whirling. "We will start near Diego Garcia. The American pre-positioning ships are there, and under-defended."
There is a destroyer or two with them, is there not?
Oui. More targets. C'est bon.
Dawn recovered her last lifeboat, and the impromptu flotilla got underway an hour before midnight. Bella Wood in the lead. Grace Hopper and Morton, both with full missile onloads, steamed 1,000 yards off the cruise ship's port and starboard beams, while Fletcher brought up the rear. Admirals Rodriguez and Hamilton, the latter was slightly senior, but not about to piss in her friend's rice bowl, contemplated heading towards Diego Garcia, the closest friendly port. But that meant steaming closer to India, so they turned southeast, making best speed for Perth, Australia. Within hours, 2 Australian frigates left port to meet them. Kansas caught up during the personnel transfer and was set ahead to make sure no unfriendly submarines targeted the flotilla. Admiral Rodriguez didn't trust Commander Kennedy's judgment, but relieving the man when the world was on fire might be a bit much. He'd kick that one up to 7th Fleet. Tripoli and Harrisburg, LPD 30, would meet his new task force halfway there, providing air cover and more missiles to match any incoming threat. Most everyone finally felt safe enough to go to sleep. Alex, however, stood on Dawn's main deck, watching the dim shape of Fletcher back aft. "Brooding, Commander?" Admiral Hamilton asked, walking up from behind him. Alex blinked. "Just thinking, ma'am." "I take it you heard." Her narrow face held no amusement, but how was that new? Alex knew they'd never like each other, but as a Terminal 05, what did that matter? He was just marking time until retirement. "Heard what?" Worry bubbled in Alex's stomach. "Unless you mean the Indian sub sinking those 2 cargo ships," he grimaced. "Or Kansas and the French frigate. Leave it to Chris Kennedy to sink a ship when they weren't at war." Alex felt sorry for the crew, and for Kennedy's new XO. "Congress passed a declaration of war," Hamilton said. "There were only 12 dissenting votes." "What?" "We're at war, for the first time since World War II, the Admiral said. France and India returned the declaration within the hour, and so did Russia." Alex's jaw dropped. "Russia?" "Looks like they signed mutual defense treaties with France and India," Hamilton grimaced. "We knew they were selling technology to the Indians, but this is unexpected." "Jesus Christ," Alex whispered, shivering. "Did we?" She shook her head. "We were the icing on the cake. It was already out of control." Alex didn't know what to say. His eyes swiveled back to Dudley W. Morton, the destroyer named for America's most legendary submariner. Mush Morton changed the way U.S. submarines brought the war to the enemy back in World War II, redefining submarine warfare forever, but losing his life in the process. How many more would die in this war? "War changes a great many things in the service," Hamilton said. "I will never like you, and I disapprove of your methods. I'm not sure if it was cowardice or courage that made you refuse to shoot on Kansas. But you showed courage on Armistice Station, and we'll need people like you in the days to come." "Me?" Alex spun back to face her. "Name your reward. I'll pin a medal on you, one good enough to ensure you'll make captain, and find you a staff job. Or you can have your own submarine." She met his eyes. "Which will it be?" Alex didn't have to think about that. There was only one thing he wanted, and it wasn't some shiny medal. He spent an entire career burning for a submarine of his own, and with his nation on the brink of war, he knew what to do. "I'll take the boat, ma'am." "Very well." Hamilton extended a hand. "Good luck, Commander." "Thank you, ma'am." End Book 1. The Norwich University Cadets Creed. I believe that the cardinal virtues of the individual are courage, honesty, temperance, and wisdom. and that the true measure of success is service rendered to God, to country, and to mankind. I believe that the fundamental problem of society is to maintain a free government wherein liberty may be secured through obedience to law, and that a citizen soldiery is the cornerstone upon which such a government must rest. I believe that real education presupposes a sense of proportion in physical, mental, and moral development, and that he alone is educated who has learned the lessons of self-control and open-mindedness. I believe in Norwich, my alma mater, because within her halls, throughout the years, these tenets have found expression while men have been taught to be loyal to duly constituted authority in thought and word and deed. To view suffrage as a sacred privilege to be exercised only in accordance with the dictates of conscience, to regard public office as a public trust, and finally, to fight, and if need be, to die, in defense of the cherished institutions of America. K.R.B. Flint, Norwich University Class of 1903. This has been Cardinal Virtues, War of the Submarine Book 1, written by R.G. Roberts, narrated by A.J. Shuck. Copyright 2022 by Robin Gale Roberts. Production copyright by Robin Gale Roberts.